Hey guys, tonight we begin a slow journey into the heart of the Islamic Golden Age, into Baghdad around the year 900 CE. And here's the part that still unsettles historians. The famous round city of the caliphs was built with such mathematical precision that scholars still argue whether it was primarily a political masterpiece of urban planning or a gigantic astrological talisman aligned deliberately with the movement of the heavens. This contradiction, a city of logic and science shaped perhaps by the language of the stars, is one of the many mysteries that make Golden Age Baghdad so irresistibly fascinating. But before we drift deeper, imagine the early air settling across the city's curved walls, cool, faintly sweet with reed scent from the Tigris, and carrying the soft dust that always returns by morning. Lamps fade inside narrow alleys, clay bricks release the night's moisture, and the city feels like a massive sleeping heart preparing for its first quiet beat. And let's be honest, a modern person wouldn't last long here. The heat would flatten you by noon, the dust would choke your optimism by evening, and the smells, smoke, wool, spices, warm clay, river reeds, would challenge even the bravest traveller. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to see people drifting into the same story from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first light of dawn gathers slowly above the eastern gate, rising not as a sharp line, but as a soft, pale shimmer that settles over the stones. A gate guard stands on the narrow platform, wrapped in a wool cloak that still holds the night's cold. He lifts a shoulder, trying to shake off stiffness, and listens to the fragile quiet that exists only in this brief hour before sunrise. The city does not sleep entirely. No great city ever does. But in these early moments, its noise becomes hesitant, like a giant thinking about whether it truly wants to wake. He rests his hand on the wooden railing. The wood is rough beneath his skin, worn by centuries of duty shifts and bored hands tracing the grain to stay awake. A faint breeze rises, carrying the scent of damp clay, river reeds, and the unmistakable dusty sweetness that always settles over Baghdad at night. Below him, the curved line of the city wall glows faintly, its baked bricks still holding pockets of cool darkness in their crevices. The guard takes in a slow breath. His cloak, heavy from absorbing the night's moisture, clings cold to his shoulders. The sun will fix that soon enough. Baghdad is generous with heat, whether one wants it or not. For now, there is a gentleness to the air, like the last sip of cool water before the jug becomes empty for the day. He shifts his stance, and a small brass charm tied to his belt taps quietly against a metal buckle. In the stillness, that delicate chime echoes faintly between the stones, far louder than it deserves to be. The guard lets the sound fade before leaning forward to scan the horizon. Something moves there, shadows, long and uneven. A caravan, its presence is first betrayed by sound rather than sight. The soft, heavy thudding of padded camel feet, followed by the dull jangle of metal rings and leather straps brushing against fur. The animals enter mourning with their usual reluctance. One emits a low, grumbling noise that sounds suspiciously like a complaint. The guard has heard that same noise every dawn for years. He's begun to suspect that camels spend the entire night preparing new grievances for the morning. The horizon brightens gradually, spreading a thin wash of gold over the road. Shapes sharpen. The silhouettes of camels appear first, tall and lurching. Then come the bundled loads strapped across their backs, wrapped tightly in cloth to protect spices, pottery, scrolls, dried fruit, and whatever else traders hope to unload before the day becomes unbearable. The caravan master walks ahead with the determined but resigned posture of someone who has long accepted that neither humans nor animals are ever truly ready for dawn. The guard stretches his fingers. They ache faintly from gripping his spear through the night, though he rarely has need to use it. Most nights are quiet. Most threats stay theoretical. The weapon exists mainly to persuade trouble to look elsewhere. Below him, other guards stir to life. One rubs his eyes with the heel of his palm, another adjusts the leather strap securing the heavy beam that bars the gate. Their movements are slow, unhurried, shaped by routine. Dawn has a way of slowing everything down. Only the sun moves quickly. The caravan approaches the gate with steady, unromantic plodding. A camel exhales sharply, producing a wet snort that sends a thin spray of moisture into the air. The guard watches the droplets shimmer briefly in the rising light. He has seen more beautiful sights in his years of service, but not many that arrive before sunrise. A breeze shifts again, carrying with it a sharper mix of smells. Wool warmed by yesterday's sun, leather oiled to prevent cracking, rope fibres, coriander, and something smoky, perhaps resin still burning in a small travel brazier. The guard accepts the scent without a change of expression. In Baghdad, air is not an empty space. It is an archive of everything carried through it. He signals to the men below. They position themselves beside the thick gate beam, gripping it with both hands. When they lift, the old wood sighs deeply, as though woken unwillingly from a long sleep. The guard steps down from the platform, descending the narrow, spiralling staircase carved into the gate tower. Every step is familiar underfoot, and he knows exactly which stone has a shallow crack that will catch a careless heel. By the time he reaches the ground, the gate has begun its slow swing outward. The hinges groan with a voice that seems older than the walls themselves. Cold morning air spills in from outside, brushing across the guard's face. It carries a fine mist of desert dust that glitters faintly as it catches the sunlight. Dust is a permanent companion here. People often say that Baghdad has 3 seasons: hot, hotter, and dusty. The guard believes this assessment is overly optimistic because dust is not seasonal at all. It simply waits, then reappears, like a persistent acquaintance who always finds a way back into one's life. The caravan moves forward. The guard stands to the side, watching each animal as it passes. He examines the bundles, searching for odd shapes or suspicious bulges, though danger rarely travels openly in the early hours. One camel tilts its head toward him and makes a sound low in its throat, almost mocking. The guard raises an eyebrow. In all his years, he's never met an optimistic camel. Historical fact drifts through his mind unbidden. Travellers describe entering Baghdad at dawn as entering a city of rising perfume. They speak of spices, incense, flowers, cooking fires, all lifting with the morning heat. The guard finds this flattering but inaccurate. At dawn, the city smells more like clay, ash, and wool, with the occasional hint of something pleasant if one is lucky. As the caravan passes the threshold, sunlight begins to break over the rooftops behind the gate. Dust suspended in the air ignites in the glow, turning the space into a world of drifting gold. The guard breathes in the shimmering haze and exhales slowly. Morning, for a brief moment, feels forgiving. One of the younger guards steps beside him. "The sun is kinder at dawn," he says quietly. The older guard shakes his head. "It is only pretending. In a few hours it will remember what it is." The younger one smirks. "Then enjoy the lie while it lasts." The older guard almost laughs, but he allows himself a faint smile. Another camel groans loudly as it enters the city, startling a small bird perched on the gate arch. The bird flutters upward, circles once, then settles again as if resigned to the disruptions of human life. The guard watches it, noting how creatures without words often understand morning better than people. He steps forward to inspect the road just outside the gate. A thin layer of night moisture still darkens the sand, and each camel footprint sinks deep into it. These marks will vanish quickly. Baghdad's streets forget everything by midday. The combination of sun and feet and wheels erases all stories written in dust. As more caravan members enter, some leading donkeys, others balancing baskets or clay jars, the guard notices a detail he has observed countless times: the way people instinctively soften their movements at dawn. They speak in lower tones, they avoid sharp gestures. The day has not yet earned the right to be loud. A quirky detail surfaces in his thoughts. Some caravan masters believe that entering a city quietly ensures better sales. Others argue loudly at dawn just to wake the merchandise. He has witnessed both strategies. Neither seems to matter more than heat and luck. From deep within the city, a faint clang emerges, the sound of a metalworker tapping a tool against a copper vessel. The rhythm is slow, almost musical. Morning sounds multiply, a donkey braying somewhere in the alleys, the distant splash of water being drawn from a well, the soft shuffle of someone sweeping their doorstep before the heat makes sweeping unbearable. The guard resumes his position near the gate. Behind him, the rising sun paints the round city's outer wall in molten amber. He looks at its curved structure, following the line with his eyes. Historians in later centuries will debate how precisely this wall matched the original geometric plan, whether it truly formed a perfect circle or whether practical building constraints softened the ideal. Some accounts insist it was mathematically flawless. Others suggest chroniclers exaggerated. The guard has no opinion on the matter. Circles and measurements have little to do with his duties. What he knows is that the wall stands, the gate opens, and dawn arrives every day whether the geometry pleases scholars or not. The caravan finishes entering the city. The last camel steps through, leaving a wide, deep imprint in the damp sand. The guards move to pull the gate inward. The hinges groan again, softer this time. The beam lowers with a tired thud. The sun climbs higher, bright enough now to shorten shadows and warm the guard's face. He closes his eyes briefly as the light settles over him. The cloak on his shoulders begins its slow transformation, from cold shield to reluctant burden. Baghdad breathes in, and the day begins. The alleys of Baghdad hold their own kind of dawn, one that arrives later than the one at the eastern gate and moves more slowly, slipping through shadowed walls and half-open shutters like a cautious guest. A single guard, having left his place at the gate, steps into one of these narrow corridors as the coolness still clings to the clay bricks on either side. Here, the sun has not yet found a way in. The air is thick with night's last breath, damp, grainy, tinged with the unmistakable scent of old smoke. He moves with measured steps, careful not to slip on the smooth patches of worn stone beneath his sandals. Baghdad's alleys are unpredictable. Some are soft with dust, others are polished by years of feet passing over them. He knows which stones dip unexpectedly, which corners hide loose pebbles, and which patches collect condensation until the heat dries them. Knowledge of such things is less romantic than the stories travellers tell, but far more useful. From deeper within the alley, a soft scraping sound emerges. Someone is already awake. A broom made of tied palm fibres drags across the ground with a slow, resigned rhythm. The guard recognizes the sound instantly. Every neighborhood has someone who rises early to sweep the walkway, sometimes out of duty, sometimes out of habit, sometimes simply because sleep refuses to stay long enough. He rounds the bend and sees a figure bent over a patch of ground outside a home. The person works methodically, sweeping away the thin film of dust that settled overnight. It is an endless task. The dust always returns. The guard has heard people joke that sweeping in Baghdad is less a chore and more a philosophical exercise in accepting defeat with dignity. The sweeper pauses and wipes a wrist across their forehead, though there is no sweat yet, only the promise of it. The guard continues walking, offering a brief nod as he passes. The gesture is returned in silence. In this early hour, words feel too heavy to use. Farther ahead, the alley widens slightly, just enough to allow the first sliver of sunlight to touch the upper walls. The light lands on a row of clay jars lined up beneath a wooden awning. Some hold pickled vegetables, others contain water drawn from a canal. One jar is uncovered, and the guard catches a faint scent of mint rising from within. Someone has prepared it the night before so that it cools in the open air. The aroma is fresh enough to momentarily cut through the earthiness of the alley. A soft thud echoes from somewhere above. The guard glances upward to see a figure on a rooftop terrace shaking out a small wool blanket. Dust cascades down like golden sand through the early light. Much of it drifts harmlessly into the alley, but a portion falls directly toward him. He steps aside just in time. City living requires vigilance, especially when people overhead rid themselves of yesterday's dust as casually as flicking crumbs from a table. From behind a wooden door comes the faint rattling of clay pots. Someone inside is preparing for the morning meal. The guard smells something warm and slightly sweet. The first stage of frying dough. Somewhere nearby, a baker must already be heating oil for small breakfast pastries. The scent mixes with the alley's usual blend of clay and cool stone, transforming it into something almost welcoming. He turns another corner. Here, the alley narrows again, but it also brightens as a lantern hangs from a high crossbeam. Its flame flickers weakly in the growing light, barely necessary now. A thin trail of smoke snakes upward and disappears before reaching the top of the wall. Lanterns often remain lit longer than needed because no one wants to climb up to extinguish them until the sun is unmistakably awake. As the guard walks, he passes a doorway where a servant is crouched beside a small brazier, coaxing a flame to life. The fire sputters. coughing out a puff of grey smoke that drifts directly into the guard's path. He waves it away instinctively. Smoke in Baghdad is like an uninvited storyteller. It insists on being noticed, no matter how familiar it has become. A historical fact passes through his thoughts as the smell of burning wood lingers. Despite Baghdad's wealth and grandeur, fuel has always been scarce. Wood must be brought from far regions, and charcoal is costly. Most households burn whatever they can, from palm husks to dried river reeds, creating a patchwork of scents that drift through the alleys like a daily announcement of the city's uneven fortunes. Ahead, a thin stream of water trickles from a pipe jutting out from one of the walls, spills into the gutter, and travels toward the main street. It is not clean water, more the morning aftermath of someone rinsing a pot or washing their hands. The guard steps over it and watches as the little stream carries away bits of ash and sand before disappearing around a corner. From far above, pigeons coo softly, settling onto the edge of a rooftop. Their feathers rustle in the gentle morning breeze. The guard listens to their muted calls. Birds always know when morning truly begins. Humans wake either too early out of obligation or too late out of comfort. Birds do neither. They simply rise when the world is ready. He turns into a wider lane where a small workshop sits half hidden behind woven reed mats hanging over the entrance. The mats sway lightly with each breath of wind. From inside comes a steady tapping, slow, deliberate, as if someone is testing a tool rather than working in earnest. The guard recognizes the sound, a craftsman shaping soft copper into a bowl or pot. Even at dawn, even in quiet moments, the city's crafts begin their day. He pauses briefly outside the workshop. The smell of heated metal mixes with the faint aroma of oil and clay. A small window beside the door glows with the light of a single candle. Inside, a figure bends over a block of wood, holding a piece of copper in one hand and a small hammer in the other. The rhythmic tapping is soft enough not to disturb the neighborhood, but steady enough to be comforting. Some crafts thrive on the silence of morning, when workers can listen to their own thoughts without being drowned in the chaos of the day. Moving on, the guard steps into another narrowing alley. This one descends slightly, its ground uneven, forming shallow channels that guide runoff during rare rains. As he walks, he notes a faint smell of boiled lentils lingering from the night before. Perhaps a family prepared a late meal and discarded the remnants into the street. It is a common enough practice. The city devours anything left out long enough. Dogs, birds, or simply the sun baking it into dust. Near the alley's end, he hears a cough. Not a mild clearing of the throat, but a deep, rattling cough that shakes a frail chest. A person dressed in thin cotton sits on a low doorstep, wrapped in a blanket despite the morning's coolness. The guard slows slightly. Illness is common in the dense quarters of the city. Doctors and herbalists do their best. But the city's population is vast and remedies are uneven. A simple cough can stretch into days of weakness. A strange chill can become a fever by nightfall. The guard nods to the sick figure in silence and continues walking. He is not a physician, and morning patrol does not allow for long pauses. Yet the sound of the cough lingers in his ears, a reminder that the city's beauty and suffering walk the same narrow paths every day. A soft splash draws his attention to a side canal, a narrow waterway that runs behind several homes. A man kneels beside it, dipping a jar into the water. The guard watches without interfering. People know which canals are safe for cooking water and which are reserved for washing floors or soaking reeds. The division is unwritten but widely understood. Historians centuries later will argue whether these canals were originally designed as elegant irrigation channels or whether they quickly devolved into mixed-use waterways more chaotic than orderly. The guard has no opinion on the matter. He cares only that the canals remain predictable enough for daily life. He continues along the lane, stepping over a discarded palm leaf and brushing aside the edge of a hanging reed curtain. The alley finally opens into a small square bathed in soft sunlight. A few early risers walk through it with the slow deliberation that defines this hour. A child carries a bundle of kindling toward a home. An old man adjusts the ropes of a water skin hanging from a wooden hook. A woman stands at her doorway, shaking out crumbs from a basket to feed stray birds. The guard breathes in the warmth beginning to settle over the square. It is not yet heat, only anticipation. Soon the sun will climb high enough to press its full weight on the city, filling every space with shimmering light and stirring the dust into restless movement. But for now, the light is gentle, the shadows long, and the air still forgiving. He steps onto the main street that feeds into the marketplace. The stones here are smoother, shaped by wagons and countless feet. The city hums faintly ahead, soft voices, the clatter of pottery, the rustle of merchants rolling open their woven shutters. Morning is no longer tentative. It is beginning. The guard takes another slow breath. The round city expands before him, vast and alive, its alleys and streets waking in layers. In this moment, in this narrow window between night and day, Baghdad feels both ancient and newborn, and the guard walks onward, following the path that leads deeper into the city's unfolding rhythm. The house is still half asleep when the guard steps into the quieter residential quarter, but inside one of the modest courtyard homes a different rhythm has already begun. A household servant rises long before the family does, moving through the dim interior like someone who knows every stone, every creak, every draft by memory. His day starts in darkness because the house depends on him to bring it the first light. He sleeps on a thin mat near the corridor wall, close enough to hear every sound at night. Rats in the storeroom, a shutter shifting in the wind, the distant call of a night watchman. When he sits up, his joints crack faintly in the silence. The cotton blanket around him still holds the night's coolness, which clings to his skin even after he folds it neatly and sets it aside. A clay lamp rests in a niche above the mat. Its flame has long gone out, leaving only the faint smell of burnt olive oil. He touches the lamp's edge, cool, slightly gritty, and decides there's enough light now to work without it. Dawn filters into the courtyard through a narrow opening in the roof, creating pale, uncertain shapes across the walls. The first task is the fire. He kneels beside the small brazier, a round clay vessel blackened by years of smoke. Inside are yesterday's ashes. He stirs them with a thin stick, searching for any fragments of charcoal that might still hold life. None do. So he arranges new pieces, thin twigs collected from the market's refuse piles, and a few shavings of dry palm bark. Fuel is precious. One cannot waste it. Baghdad may be wealthy, but wood is not. Even the wealthy families ration fuel carefully, and the poor make do with reeds or dried animal dung. He leans over the brazier and blows gently. A spark catches. Smoke rises in a grey coil, sharp and bitter in the cool air. It stings his eyes and he blinks several times. Anyone who imagines mornings in Baghdad smell like jasmine has clearly never prepared a fire at dawn. When the flame steadies, he sets a small copper pot above it and pours a cup of water from a jar. The water sloshes heavily, collected late the previous afternoon from a canal before the sun dipped, and kept cool in an earthen vessel. It tastes slightly of clay, but boiling makes it safer. As the water warms, he crosses the courtyard. The plastered walls glow faintly with the first hints of morning. A few dried herbs hang from a wooden beam overhead, their scents released only when touched: sage, mint, and a local plant known for driving away moths. On the far side of the courtyard, pigeons rustle in a small woven cage. They puff their feathers, adjusting to the shifting temperature. He enters the sleeping chamber. The family lies on raised wooden platforms covered with thin mats and blankets. The room is quiet except for one person's slow, rhythmic breathing. A stray beam of light finds its way through a crack in the shutter, landing on a neatly folded robe hanging on a peg. Dust drifts in the ray like golden threads. He moves silently. His task is not to wake anyone, only to prepare their morning. He smooths the bedding, straightens a pillow, and lifts a cotton sheet to shake it out in the courtyard. As he does, a small cloud of dust escapes into the air. Baghdad's dust is persistent. It clings to fabric, to hair, to skin, to memory. People say the city was born from dust and will one day return to it. The servant sometimes thinks the dust is simply trying to go home. He returns to the brazier. The water is beginning to bubble. He takes a pinch of crushed herbs from a clay jar, something mild to help the stomach wake, and sprinkles it into the pot. The smell rises almost immediately, earthy, cooling, vaguely sweet. The scent mixes with the fire's smoke, creating a strange harmony of comfort and discomfort that somehow fits the morning perfectly. A soft thud sounds from the entrance. The servant goes to lift the latch and sees a neighbour's small child setting down a basket of fresh flatbread. The families exchange bread in the early mornings, one of those unwritten customs that keeps the quarter connected. The child says nothing, only bows slightly before running off. The servant carries the basket into the house. The bread is warm, wrapped in cloth, still smelling of the underground oven from which it came. Its steam mingles with the herb-infused water, creating a fragrant blend that fills the courtyard. Breakfast in Baghdad is rarely elaborate, but warmth and timing are precious. He sets the bread on a low wooden table beside a bowl of dates. The dates are sticky, soft, and almost glowing in the faint light. Some are split open, revealing thick amber syrup inside. They will accompany the first drink once the family wakes. As he arranges the meal, a shadow moves across the inner wall. A neighbour on a rooftop terrace is shaking out a wool cloak. Dust rains down onto the courtyard like a grainy waterfall. The servant steps aside automatically. He's used to this. People in Baghdad shake their clothing wherever they stand. Doorways, rooftops, windows. Dust must go somewhere, and that somewhere is usually someone else's problem. A faint cough echoes from the street outside. The servant pauses, listening. It is a rasping, deep cough, the kind that hangs in the air like a warning. Illness creeps easily through crowded quarters. The city's healers do what they can, but the sheer number of people makes sickness a regular visitor. He returns to the pot and pours the hot drink into small cups. He places them carefully on the table. One cup is for the oldest member of the household, who prefers to rise early. The servant knows the exact moment he will appear, just when the sun reaches the far corner of the courtyard wall. He glances toward the sky. The light is climbing now, soft yellow deepening into gold. Birds begin their morning calls, coos from rooftops, high chirps from hidden perches, the flutter of wings as pigeons hop along the clay rims of water jars. Morning in Baghdad moves by sound as much as by light. A historical fact crosses the servant's mind as he works. Most houses in Baghdad share this same courtyard layout, rooms opening inward around a private space shielded from the street. It keeps families cool, preserves modesty, and traps the night's cool air a little longer. Architecture here is not about beauty. It's about surviving the day. A quirky detail accompanies the thought. In some families, it is tradition to sprinkle the courtyard floor with rosewater before dawn to invite good fortune. In this house, they are practical and skip the rosewater, but they still believe in fortune. He moves to the water jar, lifts the wooden lid, and dips a ladle into the cool depths. The water glimmers in the clay shadows. He fills a smaller jar for washing and carries it to the sleeping chamber. The sound of water splashing into a basin is the first cue that morning is officially beginning, and right on time a soft shuffle echoes from the doorway. The oldest member of the family steps into the courtyard, wrapped in a robe, blinking at the growing light. The servant bows his head lightly in greeting and offers the cup. The elder accepts it with a nod, inhales the steam, and sits on a low stool carved from a single block of wood. The servant retreats a step but does not leave. His duties are not finished. From beyond the courtyard walls, the distant hum of the awakening marketplace reaches them. Clay pots clattering, animals braying, merchants unrolling woven mats. The city's pulse is strengthening. The servant listens without needing to see it. He knows the rhythm. He knows when the noise is still safe and when it will soon become chaotic. He sets a small cloth on the floor and kneels beside the brazier to tidy the ashes. The flame has nearly died, leaving only a faint glow. He stirs it once, letting it exhale a final puff of smoke before fading completely. The morning in the house has begun. The fire has been lit, the bedding prepared, the water boiled, and the first cup served. The servant senses the shift in the air, a subtle warming, a change in the courtyard light, a softening in the elder's posture as he sips. Baghdad unfolds slowly each morning, but every household plays its part, and in this one the servant continues his quiet work, preparing the day before the day has fully arrived. The first true breath of the marketplace arrives long before its noise does. It begins as a faint vibration beneath the guard's feet as he steps onto the broad street leading into the commercial heart of the city. The stones here hold the memory of countless footsteps, traders, animals, servants, scholars, beggars, and that memory seems to stir before the people do, as though the ground itself knows what kind of day is coming. The morning light spreads slowly across the wide road that feeds into the bazaar. It touches the edges of woven canopies strung between buildings, revealing their frayed threads and sun-faded colours. Most are still rolled up, tied neatly against wooden beams, waiting, just like everyone else. A few early merchants have already arrived. They move with a quiet purpose born from necessity rather than enthusiasm. One drags his wooden cart across the stones, each wheel protesting with a long, aching squeak. Another unrolls a reed mat, tapping its corners to flatten it, releasing a small explosion of dust that drifts upward like thin smoke. Dust is the city's constant companion. Even commerce begins with dust. The guard steps aside to let a short, sturdy man pass, carrying a crate of pottery. The man balances it on one hip and uses his free hand to wave away the cloud of dust settling on his beard. Every morning, the man mutters, the sun rises and the dust rises with it. He doesn't wait for agreement. He knows everyone shares his complaint. Voices begin to emerge from the shadows of closed stalls. Soft greetings, small jokes, complaints about sleep, about heat, about the price of barley. In Baghdad, the dawn chorus is not made of birds alone. It is made of traders trading words long before they trade goods. The guard walks deeper into the marketplace as the city wakes around him. A vendor pulls down the wicker front of his stall, revealing baskets stacked with dried figs. The figs are glossy, amber-coloured, and clumped together in neat rings. The sweetness of their scent spills into the passing air. Another stall nearby displays dates so dark and syrupy they glisten like polished stones. Farther down, a butcher wipes down his wooden table with a cloth that looks like it has survived more battles than he has. He sharpens his knife with deliberate strokes, each scrape of metal against stone crisp and clean. Even before customers arrive, even before meat is set out, he prepares the day with discipline. He is one of the marketplace's pillars, the kind of man who wakes before the pigeons and sleeps after the last lamp is extinguished. A historical fact floats into the guard's thoughts. Baghdad's markets were known to travellers from across the world. Some wrote of their abundance, others of their chaos, but all agreed they were cities within the city, entire worlds of sound, scent, colour and confusion. He steps aside as a young boy rushes past, carrying a bundle of thin reeds tied with rough twine. The boy is out of breath, his sandals slapping against the ground, his hair still wild from sleep. He disappears into a side alley, where he'll deliver the reeds to a weaver who's already preparing his loom. In Baghdad, even children begin their work before the sun fully rises. The guard pauses before a spice stall. The merchant is an older man with a long, silvered beard and a habit of humming while he works. He begins opening his clay jars one by one, and the scents bloom into the morning air. Turmeric, cumin, cinnamon, saffron. Each fragrance rises like a slow exhale, drifting into the street and layering over everything else. The guard has walked past this stall every morning for years, yet the moment the jars open, he always pauses. Spices have their own kind of authority. They announce themselves without permission. A quirky detail comes to mind. Some merchants sprinkle a line of salt along the edge of their stalls at dawn to keep envy away. The guard never believed in such things, but he has noticed that stall holders who skip the salt often sprinkle it later in the day after a bad sale. Superstition moves faster than logic in a marketplace. Voices grow louder as the sun lifts further. The clatter of clay pots mixes with the shuffle of sandals. A donkey brays loudly from behind the stack of woven baskets, startling a man who nearly drops a jar of sesame paste. The guard smothers a brief smile. Donkeys seem to take special pleasure in choosing the exact moment when silence might have been possible. He turns down a row of textile stalls. Here the colours begin to wake. Deep indigo, pomegranate red, softened apricot, pale sand. Rolls of cloth hang like thick scrolls, each waiting to be unfurled into the hands of tailors and wealthy families. A weaver sits cross-legged on a mat sorting dyed threads with meticulous attention, his fingers stained blue from yesterday's work. Next to him, a small oil lamp flickers stubbornly, even though sunlight now floods the lane. The weaver leaves it burning as a habit. He believes silence is best woven in the company of a small flame. No one questions such traditions. In a city this old, everyone carries at least one belief that makes perfect sense only to them. The guard follows the curve of the marketplace. The road widens again, and the flow of people thickens. A woman carrying a basket of herbs balances the weight with one hand and adjusts her headscarf with the other. A young man leads a goat by a rope, murmuring to it as if trying to reason with a creature deeply opposed to reasoning. The goat bleats unimpressed. Near the centre of the marketplace stands a large stone basin used by water sellers. One such seller arrives now, a tall man with a pair of heavy goatskin bags slung over his shoulders. He blows into a small reed flute to announce his presence, a thin, musical chirp that dances through the air. The guard looks at the bags. The water is drawn from a cleaner canal further upstream, and customers will line up soon, hopeful for freshness. Water may be simple, but in Baghdad, clean water is a luxury wrapped in routine. The guard continues walking, absorbing the marketplace in its unfolding layers. A ceramic vendor arranges glazed bowls so their edges catch the morning light. A woman sets out tiny bottles filled with rosewater, their corks tied with a delicate string. A man with rough hands displays knives and tools on a wooden plank, tapping each one as though checking its loyalty. And somewhere in the distance, the faint notes of a musician's reed pipe drift through the bazaar. He plays for coins, for practice, or perhaps for the simple pleasure of waking the day with melody. His music is fragile, easy to lose in the rising noise, but it reaches the guard's ears long enough to soften the heaviness of morning duty. As he walks, he overhears the familiar argument beginning again between two neighbouring merchants. One accuses the other of pushing the boundary of his stall forward by the width of a palm. The other denies it with great indignation, claiming the earth itself has shifted overnight. The guard knows this argument well. It appears twice a month with the same passion and the same lack of resolution. A historian's debate crosses his mind. Did the marketplace follow strict spatial regulations set by the caliph's administrators, or did it expand and reshape itself naturally over time, each stall creeping outward like growing branches? Written records disagree sharply. Some claim meticulous order, others insist the bazaar grew like a living thing. The guard looks at the merchants arguing over palm widths and feels the answer lies somewhere in between. At a stall selling cooked food, a pot of steaming lentils bubbles over a small fire. The smell is rich, earthy, comforting. The guard passes close enough to feel the warmth against his hand. A vendor stirs the pot with a wooden ladle that has clearly survived decades of stirring. The man glances up at the guard and mutters, "If I had a coin for every time I burned myself in the morning, I'd have enough gold to retire." The guard offers a soft grunt of sympathy. It is too early for eloquence. The marketplace now hums fully. The rising sun strikes the canopies and fills the spaces between them with streaks of honey-coloured light. The guard stands for a moment in the centre of the road, letting the sound, scent and movement settle into him. The city is no longer waking, it is awake. Wool brushes stone, clay taps clay. Oil sizzles, voices weave together, the bazaar breathes, the day has found its rhythm. The guard turns away from the main artery of the bazaar and steps into a narrower street that leads toward the craftsman's quarter, a district that wakes with a different kind of energy. Here, the day does not rise softly. It begins with iron, with heat, with the unmistakable ring of tools striking tools. Even at dawn, this part of the city breathes work. The road dips slightly as he enters, and the first thing he notices is the smell. The bazaar smells of spices and bread. This place smells of fire and metal. Warm, metallic, gritty, like the air has already been hammered into shape before the sun is fully up. The guard moves slowly, letting his eyes adjust to the dimmer light. The buildings lean closer together, their walls a patchwork of soot, clay and sun-bleached plaster. From a workshop on the left, a rhythmic clanging begins. Not loud, just steady, the clang of a hammer hitting a small anvil. The guard knows this sound well. It means a metalworker is warming up his hands, waking his tools the way others stretch their limbs. Craftsmen here treat their tools almost like people. Some talk to them, others scold them. A few offer morning blessings to their hammers before striking the first blow of the day. The guard steps nearer the open doorway. Inside, a metalworker sits cross-legged by a low forge. The flames glow red-orange, and the man holds a piece of copper with tongs, turning it slowly over the heat. The workshop is dim except for the glow of the forge and a single lamp flickering on a shelf. Sparks hiss briefly in the air, catching light before disappearing into shadows. The man notices the guard but continues working. The rhythm of creation is more urgent than conversation. A historical fact drifts into the guard's thoughts. Baghdad was famous for its artisans. Travellers from distant lands praised the city's metalwork, glass, carpets and carved wood. Workshops like this were the quiet engines of that reputation. Small spaces filled with noise, sweat, skill and the heat of 100 daily miracles. As the guard moves on, he hears another sound emerging from deeper in the district, thick, heavy, almost like a drum beat. He knows it instantly. the pounding of a blacksmith shaping heated iron. The blacksmith's workshop is larger than the others, with an open front to keep heat from becoming unbearable. The guard approaches slowly, feeling the temperature shift even before he reaches the doorway. Inside, the blacksmith stands before a roaring furnace, his arms bare, muscles taut with effort. He lifts a long iron rod glowing red at the tip and places it on the anvil. The hammer rises, falls, rises again. Each strike sends a spray of sparks outward. The clang reverberates through the space, echoing down the street. The guard steps back slightly. Blacksmithing is a craft that demands respect for distance. Too close, and one finds a new appreciation for fire. Somewhere behind the anvil, a small boy pumps the bellows with steady determination. The child's hair is streaked with soot, and his tunic is patched at the shoulder, but his eyes are bright, focused on the rhythm of the bellows. The guard wonders, not for the first time, how many craftsmen learned their trade at that exact age, sitting in the heat, learning patience from flame and discipline from iron. A soft, almost amused thought crosses his mind. People say Baghdad's blacksmiths could tell the time of day by the colour of heated metal. He suspects that might be true. He steps away from the forge and turns toward another row of workshops. Here the air smells of clay. Potters sit beside wide, low wheels, spinning wet earth between their hands. One man shapes a jar with careful pressure, his palms moving with slow confidence. His fingers leave ridges that spiral upward like fingerprints encircling the vessel. The floor beneath him is caked with dried mud, cracked and flaking. Nearby, another potter brushes slip onto a half-dried bowl, muttering under his breath about humidity and temperature, elements that rule pottery more than skill or strength. One drop of extra moisture can ruin the shape. One overly warm gust of wind can split a drying jar. Pottery is a craft of small tyrannies. A quirky detail surfaces in the guard's memory. Some potters believe that whispering to clay helps prevent cracks during firing. He once saw a man murmur reassurances to a jug as though comforting a nervous friend. Whether the clay listened or not, the jug survived. Farther down the street, the guard enters the tanner's alley. The smell announces itself before he reaches it. Sharp, pungent, unmistakable. Tanning is necessary work, but it is not delicate. The hides of sheep and goats soak in deep pits of treated water, turning from raw skin into usable leather. The guard tries not to breathe too deeply as he passes. Even seasoned residents avoid inhaling unnecessarily here. Tanners work with practiced efficiency. One scrapes a hide stretched across a wooden frame, removing the last remnants of fat. Another dips a hide into a vat, his arms disappearing into the murky liquid. A third wrings water from a piece of leather, twisting it with a strength that seems improbable for his thin frame. The guard watches for a moment, then moves on. Even he, accustomed to the realities of the city, prefers distance from the tanner's alley, but he respects their labour. Baghdad's saddles, shoes, belts, armour fittings, all begin their lives in this pungent place. Turning a corner, he enters a quieter part of the district. Here, woodworkers shape beams, bowls, and small decorative objects. The air smells of sawdust, dry, warm, and almost sweet. A man seated on a low stool carves an intricate pattern into a wooden chest. The guard watches the shavings fall in curls to the floor. Another craftsman is sanding a long plank, smoothing the surface with rhythmic strokes. His hands move with the confidence of someone who has done this every day for decades. A young apprentice sweeps the sawdust into a neat pile. The guard notices the boy's frown. Sawdust never stays neat. A single footstep sends it swirling again. A single breath scatters it. The apprentice sweeps with determination anyway, and the guard admires the effort, though he knows it will not last long. A faint laugh escapes him, soft but genuine. Craftsman and dust wage the same war from sunrise to sunset. Neither side wins. He steps past the woodworkers and finds himself in the glassmaker's lane. Here, delicate heat replaces the heavy heat of the forge. Glassmakers work with long rods, shaping glowing molten orbs into thin vessels with practiced breath and motion. The guard watches as one artisan blows gently into the end of a pipe, expanding the molten glass into a sphere that shimmers like captured sunlight. The orb wobbles slightly, and the artisan steadies it, turning the rod with precise timing. The air inside the workshop is warm, thick, and shimmering. Glassmaking is a dance with temperature. A few heartbeats can determine whether the vessel becomes a masterpiece or shatters into glittering shards. The guard has seen both outcomes. He walks on. Now the scent shifts again, ink and parchment. Near the edge of the craftsman's quarter, scribes set up small outdoor desks to copy documents for merchants, travellers or scholars. One dips a reed pen into ink, shaking off the excess before writing. Another sharpens the tip of a pen with a small knife, making tiny adjustments. The scratching sound of pen on paper is soft, almost relaxing. A third scribe blows lightly across a fresh line to dry it faster. A historical debate flits into the guard's thoughts. Some scholars claim Baghdad had strict guilds that governed each craft here. Metalworkers, potters, glassmakers, scribes, each with its own rules and hierarchies. Others argue that the artisans operated informally, bound more by necessity and shared space than by official decree. The truth, like most things in the city, likely lies somewhere between order and improvisation. The guard steps aside as a man carrying a basket of chisels passes him. The man nods in greeting and the guard returns it with equal brevity. Words are unnecessary here. The language of the quarter is sound, motion and routine. He moves toward a wide courtyard shared by several workshops. A donkey stands tethered near the entrance, chewing lazily on a pile of straw. The animal lifts its head to look at the guard, chews slowly, then resumes eating as though the matter required no further consideration. The guard finds this entirely reasonable. Donkeys seldom concern themselves with anything that does not directly affect straw. In the courtyard, artisans gather around a stone trough filled with water. They wash their hands, their tools, or simply splash their faces to fight the rising heat. The guard dips his fingers into the cool water. It chills his skin instantly. He lets the droplets fall, feeling them evaporate almost as soon as they leave his hand. He steps back and surveys the quarter. The sun is climbing now, shining through cracks, alleyways and open doors. The noise rises with it. Metal ringing, tools tapping, voices shouting instructions. Work has fully begun. The craftsman's quarter is alive, and the guard moving through it feels the pulse of the city strengthen with every step he takes. The street narrows again as the guard leaves the craftsman's quarter behind. The metallic echoes fade, replaced by quieter, finer sounds, soft footsteps, the flutter of parchment, the muted clearing of throats. He's entering the district where scholars, scribes, translators, and students begin their day long before the sun reaches its full strength. Here, learning has its own rhythm, its own smells, its own form of noise. It is not the clamour of hammers or the chatter of merchants. It is subtler, an undercurrent of concentration. The air itself feels different. Still dusty, still warm, still carrying the scents of clay and city life, but layered now with something sharper, ink. Fresh ink has a particular fragrance, earthy, metallic, faintly sweet from the soot and gum used to make it. The guard recognizes it immediately. Ink means work is already happening. He turns a corner and finds a long, shaded colonnade stretching before him. Under these arches, several scribes have already set up their small writing desks. Each desk is a simple platform of wood or woven reed, with stacks of parchment or palm leaf paper tied neatly at the side. The scribes sit cross-legged, the posture of people who expect to sit for many hours without moving. One dips his reed pen into an inkpot, tapping it lightly against the rim. Another sharpens the pen's tip with a tiny knife, flicking off the shavings. A third holds a scroll open with two smooth stones to keep the wind from curling it. Their movements form a calm choreography, precise, patient, practiced. The guard steps quietly between them. A few glance up in acknowledgement but return to their work without pause. This is not a district for conversation. Here, silence is a tool as essential as ink and parchment. He pauses near one scribe whose hands move with unusual speed. The guard watches for a moment, admiring the tiny, elegant strokes forming letters on the page. Scribes like this keep Baghdad's intellectual world alive, copying manuscripts, translating foreign texts, or recording transactions. Without them, the city's knowledge would dissipate like sand carried by the winds. A historical fact drifts into the guard's mind. Baghdad in this era is one of the great centres of learning in the world. Scholars travel here from distant lands to read, debate, and contribute to a growing body of knowledge. Books circulate through hands and markets like spices or silk. Even people who cannot read know the value of someone who can. He walks farther, toward a courtyard filled with low wooden benches. Students sit on them, most wearing simple robes, their hair still damp from morning washing. Some hold wax tablets for practicing their handwriting. Others clutch small booklets of poetry or mathematics. A few lean over a single shared scroll, whispering to each other in hushed tones. The guard cannot hear the words, but he recognizes the cadence, the sound of minds beginning to warm. A robed teacher stands at the far end of the courtyard, hands clasped behind his back. His voice carries low and steady across the space, measured, calm, as though he expects to speak all day and has no reason to rush. Students tilt their heads toward him, attentive but relaxed. Morning lessons move more slowly than afternoon ones. The heat hasn't yet chased urgency into anyone's blood. Near the back of the courtyard, a small debate is already forming. Two students arguing in whispers about a line of logic written on a slate. One gestures with the chalk, the other with an open palm. Their argument is gentle, almost sleepy, like two cats swatting at the same spot of sun. The guard watches with faint amusement. Scholars quarrel differently than merchants or craftsmen. Their disputes rarely involve raised voices. Instead, they wield words like careful tools, shaping ideas with sharpness that only grows sharper as the day unfolds. A quirky detail surfaces in the guard's memory. Scholars often carry small pouches of dried rose petals to combat the smell of old parchment and ink. He once saw a student bury his entire face in the pouch after spending hours on translation work. Knowledge may be noble, but the process can be less romantic. Leaving the courtyard, the guard continues toward the smaller lanes where translators gather. These are quieter still, occupied by people who spend their lives turning Greek, Persian, Syriac, Sanskrit, and other languages into Arabic. Their desks are cluttered with scrolls, inkpots, weights, and notes scribbled in margins. Some mutter to themselves as they compare lines. Others sit perfectly still, eyes flicking back and forth between two manuscripts like dancers following choreography. Only they understand. One translator squints at a page, leans closer, and mutters something in frustration. The guard catches only a few words, something about a phrase that could mean three things or nothing at all. He moves on, leaving the translator to his battle with ambiguity. A historical debate crosses the guard's mind. Scholars disagree about how translation work was organized in the city. Some claim there were formal bureaus carefully supervised and funded by wealthy patrons. Others believe the translators worked independently, gathering in clusters simply because collaboration made sense. The guard sees only the reality before him. People bent over texts, working by habit, necessity, or passion. He turns down another lane where the sun filters through a lattice of wooden beams overhead. The light creates shifting patterns on the dusty ground. Thin lines, soft squares, gently trembling shapes as the wind nudges the beams. A few students walk by carrying bound notebooks. One sneezes as dust flutters down from a rooftop. He mutters something about the city conspiring against study. The guard quietly agrees. In a small alcove off the main lane, a scholar sits alone with a pile of scrolls beside him. His robe is slightly wrinkled as though he rose quickly at dawn. He reads slowly, lips moving silently, tracing each line with the tip of his finger. A pot of ink sits beside him, ready to record a commentary or correction. The guard watches the man for a long moment. Learning, he thinks, demands a different kind of strength than physical work, but strength nonetheless. Farther along, he passes a small shop where ink makers mix pigment and gum in shallow bowls. The smell here is strong, sharp like smoke, but with a faint sweet undertone. One worker uses a smooth stone to grind soot into powder. Another stirs the mixture with a carved stick, checking its thickness. Ink making is a delicate process. Too thick, and it clogs pens. Too thin, and it bleeds across parchment. The guard respects their precision. He nods to them as he passes. They nod back without pausing their work. The lane opens again into a small square shaded by date palms. Scholars sit beneath the trees, reading or discussing topics too complex for the early hour. One leans forward, gesturing animatedly. Another leans back, eyes half closed, listening as though absorbing knowledge requires no movement at all. A pot of tea sits cooling on a nearby ledge, forgotten in the intensity of their discussion. The guard briefly considers stepping into the shade, but he knows he would not understand half the words spoken here. Knowledge in this district is a river flowing swiftly, and he is content to watch it pass. He walks on. The sounds of the scholarly quarter build gradually. Scratching pens, murmured recitations, turning pages, occasional exasperated sighs. These are the city's quietest noises, yet perhaps its most powerful. Here, ideas are shaped and reshaped. Here, people prepare texts that will travel far beyond Baghdad. Here, the day begins not with fire or trade, but with thought. One final sound reaches him from a distant corner, a brief, unmistakable sneeze followed by a resigned groan. Someone has inhaled a lungful of old parchment dust. The guard almost allows himself a smile. Even knowledge demands a physical price. He takes a final deep breath of ink-scented air and steps toward the path leading to the House of Wisdom. Baghdad continues to unfold around him. The day grows brighter, and the guard walks on. The road widens as the guard approaches the district that houses one of the city's greatest treasures, the House of Wisdom. Even before the building itself comes into view, the area announces its presence. The air shifts again, as though gathering itself in quiet anticipation. Sounds soften. Footsteps slow. Even the dust settles differently here, drifting more lazily through the morning light, as if respecting the gravity of the place. The guard walks beneath a row of date palms planted decades earlier to shade the approach. Their fronds rustle overhead in the rising breeze, whispering in long, gentle strokes. The shadows fall in soft stripes across the ground. Sunlight filters through between them, shimmering like thin gold threads. It is cooler here than in the rest of the city, a welcome pause in the growing heat. Ahead, the first outer walls of the House of Wisdom appear. They are tall, pale and smooth, built of carefully shaped bricks whose edges hold the faint sheen of thousands of sunrises. The top of the wall is lined with carved geometric patterns, simple, repeating, harmonious. Even the architecture here speaks a language of order. The guard slows his pace without realizing it. He has walked this path many times, yet each time it feels slightly different. Some places in Baghdad feel alive, but this place feels aware, as though it holds the memory of everyone who ever walked through its doors. A few figures move along the path ahead, a scribe carrying a bundle of scrolls tied with a leather strap, a young student clutching a wax tablet to his chest, a translator deep in thought, lips moving silently as though rehearsing a passage. They walk with purpose and distraction at the same time, minds already elsewhere. The guard steps aside to allow them to pass. He watches the student trip over his own feet while reciting something under his breath. The tablet nearly slips from the boy's grip. The guard catches it mid-air and returns it with a nod. The student blushes, mumbles thanks, and hurries on. Scholars, the guard thinks, live in two worlds at once, one under their feet, one in their heads. As he approaches the main entrance of the House of Wisdom, he sees the building emerge fully from behind the palms, a large structure with broad arched doorways, tall windows fitted with lattice screens, and a roofline designed to entice the sun rather than defy it. Its colour is the same warm beige as the city around it, but its proportions, its calm symmetry, its sheer balance set it apart. Nothing juts out unnecessarily. Nothing leans awkwardly. It is as if the building itself is practicing good posture. A historical fact returns to him. The House of Wisdom was not only a library, it was a research centre, translation bureau, an observatory of sorts. Scholars here studied mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and texts from across empires. Knowledge flowed in and out like water, carried by travellers, traders, scribes, and thinkers from far lands. He remembers hearing someone say that during its height, books in Baghdad were more numerous than stars, an exaggeration perhaps, but one that captures the feeling of the place. The guard pauses near the entrance where a large wooden door stands open. Inside, the sound is neither silence nor noise. It is something between. Soft footsteps, the whisper of parchment, the faint clink of metal clasps on scroll cases. A breeze drifts out from within, cooler than the air outside, carrying the scent of ink, papyrus and dust that has settled on shelves for generations. He steps forward but stops before crossing the threshold. He does not enter the House of Wisdom often. His duty lies outside its walls, not within them. But standing here, he always feels a momentary pull, as though the building invites every passerby to learn something, even if only by accident. He glances upward. Green vines drape along the upper ledges, catching light as the sun climbs. The leaves shimmer faintly. A bird perched on one of the ledges tilts its head to watch him, as if guarding the entrance in its own feathered way. As he stands there, A memory surfaces, a conversation he overheard once between scholars arguing about the missing manuscripts. Some said the House of Wisdom once held texts now lost entirely. Others believed the records exaggerated its size. A few whispered theories more dramatic: secret removals, political purges, accidental misplacements, or intentional hiding for reasons no one could agree on. The guard knows nothing of such mysteries, but he knows that people argue most fiercely about things they cannot see clearly. He steps back slightly to let a group of older scholars enter. They walk slowly, leaning on wooden canes that tap gently against the stone. Their robes are worn but clean, and each carries a small pouch of tools, pens, inkstones, notes. One of them mutters about the heat. Another argues that the real problem is humidity. Their debate continues into the building, fading like murmurings underwater. A quirky detail drifts into the guard's mind. Some scholars insist that books breathe, and that libraries must be designed to allow proper airflow or the manuscripts will suffocate. He once heard a translator shoo someone away from a shelf, claiming their presence was blocking the air. The guard didn't argue. Scholars have their ways. He moves to the side of the entrance, where a few benches sit beneath the shade of a pergola. A man is seated there now, unrolling a scroll slowly, examining symbols that look nothing like Arabic. Greek perhaps, or something older. His lips move silently as he traces each character. A second reader naps beside him, head slumped forward, chin resting on his chest. The guard briefly wonders how one can fall asleep surrounded by so much knowledge, then remembers that some knowledge is more tiring than any patrol. He walks past the pergola, continuing along a path that circles the building. Behind the House of Wisdom lies a quieter courtyard lined with young apricot trees. Their leaves tremble softly in the morning breeze. A few scholars sit on low stools beneath them, their books held close to their faces to capture the shade. One uses a small magnifying glass, holding it delicately as though he fears it may bite. The guard pauses near a low wall, resting a hand on the warm stone. The atmosphere here differs from any other part of Baghdad. The bazaar is loud and insistent. The craftsman's quarter is hot and industrious. The residential alleys are intimate and weary. But this place hums. Not loudly, not aggressively, but with an energy that flows beneath everything. Knowledge, the guard thinks, has its own kind of sound. He looks toward a narrow doorway at the courtyard's far end. It leads to the reading halls and the archives, rooms he has heard described with reverence. Tall shelves, endless scrolls, lamps hanging like patient stars. Scholars argue about which room was built first, or whether a secret chamber ever existed behind the original archive. Some claim ancient texts were hidden there before renovations. Others insist the story is fanciful. The guard smiles faintly. Academics, he has learned, love their mysteries as much as their truths. He continues walking, circling back toward the front of the building. The sun climbs higher, brightening the walls, casting sharp shadows beneath the arches. The day is beginning to warm, but the House of Wisdom remains cool, its thick walls drinking in the heat slowly, releasing it reluctantly. A student hurries past him, clutching a scroll to his chest with both hands. The guard steps aside. The scroll unravels slightly as the student moves, revealing a few lines before snapping back into place. Another scholar follows, carrying a wooden tray loaded with ink pots that clink softly as he walks. Behind them, a small group of young learners stumbles along, nearly dropping their bundles as they whisper lines of poetry to each other. The guard moves out of their way, content to watch the flow of people passing through the building's archways. The House of Wisdom does not feel crowded. Even when many arrive, it expands to fit the minds that enter it. Or perhaps those minds shrink their concerns when they step inside. He takes one final look at the building, the curves, the arches, the quiet authority it radiates. The walls seem to glow more warmly now, reflecting the full embrace of the rising sun. It stands still, calm, centered, as though anchored not just to the city but to time itself. Baghdad breathes through many lungs, through markets, through workshops, through homes, but here, in this place, it thinks. The guard adjusts the strap on his shoulder, turns back toward the path and walks onward. The city waits. The guard steps through the archway that leads from the shaded approach into the inner grounds of the House of Wisdom. Here, the air shifts once more, cooler, calmer, denser somehow, as though sound itself moves more slowly. The courtyard opens wide before him, ringed with colonnades and shaded passages, each leading to a chamber where scholars work in near silence. Light falls from the high openings in thin, clean beams, catching particles of dust that drift lazily, suspended like tiny golden spirits that refuse to settle. He pauses just inside. Even though he has no business here beyond passing through, the space compels stillness. It is a place where footsteps instinctively soften, where even breathing feels like an intrusion. The House of Wisdom is not quiet because people are absent. It is quiet because people listen. A row of tables stretches along one colonnade, their surfaces covered with scrolls, codices, parchment sheets, ink pots, reed pens, and small stones used to hold down curling edges. A few scholars sit already, despite the early hour, hunched over their work with the posture of people whose thoughts take up far more room than their bodies do. Their robes rustle softly as they shift. Reed pens scratch lightly across parchment. The guard walks slowly along the row, careful to keep his shadow from falling across any manuscripts. He has learned this rule the hard way. Once he disrupted a scholar so deeply absorbed in a mathematical diagram that the man gasped as though awakened from his dream. Afterward, the guard decided that shadows are best left for other parts of the city. On one desk, a map is spread open, inked with sweeping lines that trace rivers, deserts, mountain passes, and caravan routes. The mapmaker leans over it, adding notes along the margins. The guard recognizes the shapes of distant lands, Persia, India, even far-flung territories he has only heard in stories whispered by travelers. To the mapmaker, these are not stories, they're coordinates. A historical fact rises in the guard's memory. Maps created in the House of Wisdom were said to be among the most accurate in the world at the time. Scholars here compared reports from traders, diplomats, sailors, and astronomers, weaving information into a shared understanding of distant places. The world shrinks inside this building, not in size, but in ignorance. The guard steps farther inside. He passes another table where an astronomer adjusts a gleaming brass instrument. It is beautifully crafted, engraved with delicate arcs and symbols. The astronomer turns a dial with precise movements, aligning it with invisible stars. On the table beside him lies a parchment filled with circular diagrams, representing planetary positions. The guard watches him for a moment, admiring the intensity of concentration. Astronomy, he thinks, requires remarkable patience, or perhaps remarkable stubbornness. A lesser-known detail he once overheard returns to him. Astronomers often smeared a mixture of scented oil below their noses to keep awake during long nights at observatories. A blend of mint and frankincense, supposedly. Whether it sharpened the mind or simply irritated it into alertness, the guard cannot say. He continues walking. Another chamber opens to his right, wider, darker, lined with shelves stacked from floor to ceiling. Scrolls are arranged in neat bundles tied with strips of cloth. Leather-bound books lean against each other, their spines marked with faded titles. The faint smell of aged parchment and dust mingles with the soft scent of cedarwood from the shelves. This room holds the older texts, some acquired through trade, others copied painstakingly by scribes, some gifted by scholars from distant courts. A few people move among the shelves like shadows. One adjusts a ladder and climbs halfway up to reach a scroll tucked behind others. Another holds a lamp close to a shelf, examining titles. Their movements are slow, almost reverent. This room has gravity. Knowledge weighs heavily here. Literally, in the form of parchment and clay tablets, and figuratively, in the form of ideas about medicine, mathematics, governance, poetry, and the stars. Historians centuries later will argue bitterly about the size and contents of this collection, whether thousands of manuscripts once filled these walls, or tens of thousands, or something far beyond counting. Some claim the catalogue of the House of Wisdom was so complex that no single person ever saw all of it. Others suspect the records were exaggerated by later writers. The guard, who stands here in the present moment, knows only that there are more scrolls than he could read in several lifetimes. He leaves the archive room and steps into a long hallway lit by high slits that let narrow beams of sunlight spill down in diagonal stripes. Dust motes float lazily through them. The hallway connects several chambers, and the guard hears the faintest sounds rising from behind each door. Whispered recitations, a cough, the soft scrape of a pen, the creak of a wooden stool shifting under someone's weight. He passes by a room where translators work. Inside, several scholars sit around a long table, each with a different manuscript spread before them. Greek, Persian, Syriac, Sanskrit. One reads aloud softly in a language unfamiliar to the guard. Another repeats the line in Arabic, adjusting the phrasing as his colleagues nod or shake their heads. Their discussion is gentle, deliberate. Translating a single line can require an hour of negotiation. Words are heavy, ideas are heavier. A translator near the window sighs loudly and pinches the bridge of his nose. This phrase, he mutters, could mean 3 things or nothing at all. His colleague responds without looking up. Then choose the meaning that causes the fewest arguments. The room chuckles quietly. The guard steps away, hiding his amusement. Scholars may speak softly, but their humour is sharp. Farther down the hall, he enters a courtyard where scholars gather in the shade of tall arches. 2 men stand facing each other, engaged in a low-voiced debate about geometry. Their hands trace shapes in the air, circles, angles, lines, as though the gestures themselves clarify the argument. A third scholar watches from a bench, nodding occasionally or shaking his head with small, precise movements. The guard does not understand the subject, but he recognizes the rhythm. Slow, deliberate, patient. Arguments here are not heated, they simmer. A small bird lands on the stone ledge beside the guard and tilts its head at him. Its feathers ruffle slightly in the breeze. The guard meets its gaze for a moment before it hops away toward a fallen crumb of bread left by someone earlier. In this place of manuscripts and ideas, even birds seem quieter. The guard wanders further into the building, where he finds a room filled with low desks and wax tablets. Students sit with straight backs, copying passages from scrolls onto their tablets. Their styluses scratch softly against the wax. Some scowl at the difficulty of a particular word. Others mouth the lines as they write. A teacher walks slowly among them, observing their progress. He taps the back of one student's tablet with a stick, correcting the angle of a letter. The student flushes and begins again. One boy wipes his forehead dramatically and mutters something about the room being hotter than a potter's kiln. The guard nearly laughs. It is barely mid-morning. The real heat has not yet arrived. He moves on. At the far end of the building lies a smaller chamber, quiet even by the House of Wisdom standards. A single scholar sits at a table hunched deeply over a fragile manuscript. The parchment is old, its edges frayed, its ink faded to a soft brown. The scholar uses a fine brush to touch the corners with a thin, transparent liquid, something used to preserve or readhere aging fibres. He works with steady, patient breaths, as though the manuscript might crumble if he exhales too quickly. This is the restoration room, where old knowledge is kept from falling apart. Without it, centuries would turn to dust in a single decade. The guard stands in the doorway but does not step inside. Even his presence feels like too much risk. The scholar's hands move with exquisite precision. One wrong motion could erase whole chapters of history. Watching him, the guard feels a strange admiration, not for bravery, as in battle, but for the gentle bravery of someone who fights decay with nothing but careful breath and delicate touch. He turns away at last and exits into another courtyard. The light is brighter now, the air warmer. A few scholars sit on mats near a shallow pool of water, either reading or simply resting. Ripples shimmer across the pool's surface, reflecting distorted shapes of arches and palm fronds. The guard pauses beside the water and dips 2 fingers into it. The coolness surprises him. It sinks into his skin and evaporates almost instantly. The House of Wisdom breathes around him, slowly, deeply, endlessly. It is not loud. It is not imposing. It is simply alive with thought. He walks toward the outer pathway, his footsteps echoing lightly along the stone. Behind him, the soft murmur of scholarship continues. Scratching pens, turning pages, quiet debates that may never end. The House of Wisdom stands still in the rising heat, and Baghdad grows wiser by the hour. The guard steps out from the shaded colonnade of the House of Wisdom, and the change hits him immediately. The air outside is no longer gentle. It is thicker, brighter, sharper. The sun has risen high enough now to press its full weight onto the city, and Baghdad responds in the only way it knows, by shimmering. Heat gathers quickly on the stones beneath his feet, warming them from cool morning grey to pale, burning gold. The ground seems to exhale. The air above it wavers in delicate ripples, bending light into trembling shapes. Shadows shrink, losing their softness. They pull close to the feet of buildings like creatures seeking refuge. The guard wipes a bead of sweat from his brow. Not much, just the first quiet announcement of what the day intends to become, Every resident of Baghdad knows this moment, when the morning's promise disappears and the sun begins its slow, inevitable claim over the city. He makes his way down a wide street toward the river. The road is clearer now than earlier. People choose their routes carefully once the sun's heat begins its ascent. Those who work under roofs walk briskly to their shops. Those who work outdoors adjust their schedules, their clothing, even their breaths. Life reorganizes itself around the sun's authority. A merchant rushes past the guard, holding a folded cloth over his head like a makeshift shade. His pace is hurried, his expression strained. The guard steps aside and lets him pass. Heat changes people, slows some, agitates others. The merchant mutters under his breath about the day being hotter than an oven left open. The guard silently agrees. The ovens in Baghdad, especially the bakeries, reach temperatures that would make even the sun proud. At the corner ahead, he passes a small group of labourers pushing a cart loaded with clay jars. They move in rhythmic unison, calling out to each other to coordinate their steps. The sun has already hardened the clay smell into something dense, almost mineral. The guard breathes it in, then exhales slowly. Clay, dust, sweat, and sunlight. Baghdad's midday perfume. He glances upward. The sky is a clear, unbroken blue with not a single cloud to soften it. Clouds are rare visitors in this season, and when they do appear, the entire city stops to admire them. Today, however, the sky is ruthless. A historical fact enters his thoughts. Travellers often wrote that Baghdad's midday heat softens the bones, a poetic way of saying it exhausts the body in ways only desert climates understand. And yet people here continue working, bargaining, crafting, studying. The city never truly stops. He turns down a shaded alley where several water sellers gather. Their goatskin bags hang like swollen lungs from wooden racks. One seller dips a ladle into a large basin and drinks deeply, letting water drip down his chin. He spots the guard and nods. "The sun woke up angry today," he says. The guard gives a quiet grunt in agreement. Another seller stands nearby, fanning himself with a palm leaf. "If this heat gets any worse," he says, "my shadow will leave me for somewhere cooler." The others laugh softly. In Baghdad, humour is a survival tool, especially under the midday sun. The guard continues toward the Tigris. As he walks, he hears the city adapting. Fabric awnings are rolled out above the marketplace lanes, stretching from rooftop to rooftop like great wings. Their colours, sun-bleached reds, ochres, dull blues, flutter softly in the rising breeze. Shops place wet sacks over their doorways to cool the air drifting inside. Children carrying baskets take slower, more deliberate steps, conserving energy. A man pours a splash of water over his mule's neck, murmuring to the creature as if apologizing for the day's cruelty. The guard reaches a wide square where the heat is strongest. The stones here collect sunlight greedily, radiating it upward. He sees a man sitting on the edge of a fountain, splashing water onto his face. Another man dips his turban into the pool, wrings it out lightly, and places it back on his head with a sigh of relief. The guard approaches the fountain and cups his hands into the water. It is warm, not cool, not refreshing, but still a welcome touch in a city where water is precious. He lets it drip from his fingers, watching the droplets fall like small beads of glass. A lesser-known detail returns to him. Some residents place small clay jugs near their windows filled with water and wrapped in cloth, allowing the wind to evaporate moisture and cool the contents slightly. It's a small battle against the sun, but in Baghdad, people prize even the smallest victories. He moves toward the river. The Tigris appears through a row of low buildings, its surface shimmering like liquid bronze beneath the sun. The river moves slowly at midday, its currents hidden beneath the glare. Boats drift lazily across it, their pilots leaning in the shade of makeshift canopies. A fisherman casts a wide net into the water, the arc of the net catching the sunlight before sinking. The guard watches it spread like a floating sunburst before disappearing under the surface. Closer to the bank, reed cutters work knee-deep in the shallows. They cut long stems with curved knives, stacking them into bundles that float beside them until they are ready to be dragged ashore. The reed cutters move with steady, practiced motions, never rushed, never wasteful. Heat is no excuse for inefficiency here, it only makes care more important. The guard steps onto a wooden dock and feels the heat radiating through the planks. A boatman lounging beneath a stretched sail glances up and smirks. "If you're looking for a breeze," he says, "you're standing in the wrong place." The guard raises an eyebrow. Even the river, The city's great lifeline cannot fully escape the sun's grip. He walks farther along the dock, passing sailors who lounge on rolled nets or coil thick ropes with lazy, economical movements. A boy scrubs a wooden bowl with sand using the grit to scour it clean. A pile of wet reeds lies beside him, smelling of river water and fresh earth. Boats creak and sway gently, sighing against the wooden posts. At the dock's far end, a ferryman dips a clay jug into the river, lifts it and frowns. He pours a small trickle onto his hand, sniffs it, and clicks his tongue. "The river tastes different today," he mutters. The guard looks at the water. From here, the sun makes the surface shimmer too brightly to see much else. River water always changes, season to season, rain to drought, but people here insist on commenting each time. Historical debate flickers through the guard's mind. Some later scholars argue that the Tigris's flow was once wider and more forceful during Baghdad's Golden Age. Others claim that ancient accounts exaggerated, and some believe seasonal flooding changed the river's memory entirely. The guard shrugs internally. Rivers are like people. They look different depending on who watches and when. He leaves the dock and walks along a shaded path that runs parallel to the riverbank. Palm fronds sway overhead, creating shifting patches of relief from the sunlight. A date picker climbs a tall palm trunk with the ease of someone climbing stairs. He ties bundles of ripe dates to a rope and lowers them to the ground, where a woman sorts them into baskets. Their movements are efficient but unhurried. The heat demands a pace that conserves breath. Soon the path leads him back toward the city's interior. He passes a row of homes whose doors are draped with wet cloths. Water drips slowly from them, evaporating almost before it reaches the ground. Inside one open doorway, he sees a family gathered around a clay water jar shaped to cool its contents through constant evaporation. A child places his cheek against the jar's surface, sighing at the small pocket of coolness it offers. The guard continues walking. People fan themselves with palm leaves. Animals cluster in patches of shade cast by walls. The sun presses harder. Light spills over rooftops and alleyways, turning every surface into a mirror of heat. A donkey brays loudly from somewhere ahead, a long, miserable complaint that seems directed specifically at the sky. The guard allows himself the faintest smile. Even the animals do not disguise their opinions about midday. He turns onto a busy street now glowing like molten gold. Heat rises in waves, blurring the edges of buildings. The guard feels sweat gathering beneath his cloak, trickling slowly along his spine. He shifts his stance, loosening the fabric slightly. Nothing helps for long. Finally, he reaches a patch of shade beneath the eaves of a tall house. The relief is immediate, not cool, but less punishing. A breeze drifts through, carrying faint scents of saffron from a nearby kitchen, mingled with the sharp tang of sun-warmed wool. He lingers there for a moment, letting his heartbeat settle. Midday in Baghdad is not for comfort. It is for endurance, and the city endures every day, every season, every life that wakes beneath its sun. The heat has settled into its full authority. By the time the guard reaches the district of kitchens and midday meals, a part of the city that awakens twice each day, once in the early morning and once now, when the sun pushes nearly everyone indoors in search of shade and food. This neighborhood is not elegant, not quiet, not orderly. It is a place of smoke, bubbling pots, clattering dishes, and aromas so strong they seem to have substance. As the guard steps into the first narrow lane, the smell strikes immediately. Hot oil, singed flour, boiled lentils, garlic crushed against stone, the faint sweetness of dates simmered in syrup, and the earthy scent of onions frying in deep clay pans. The combined perfume is overwhelming at first, like walking into a feast and a furnace at the same time. He moves slowly, letting the scents arrange themselves into something readable. This is the hour when kitchens struggle against heat as much as any worker in the city. Fires burn low but constant. Pots sit heavy on their stands. Smoke curls from vents cut into the upper walls. Every house seems to exhale food. From one open doorway, a cook fans a clay oven with rhythmic strokes of a woven mat. Each sweep sends a puff of glowing ash upward. He mutters something about the oven having the personality of a stubborn camel, and swats at the air again, convinced the fire is playing tricks on him. The guard walks by without comment. He knows the old joke. In Baghdad, ovens argue as much as households do. A woman squats beside a low wooden table just inside the next home. She chops herbs with practiced speed, her knife tapping a steady rhythm. Mint, parsley, coriander, fresh scents that briefly overpower the thick aroma of cooked grains. A clay bowl of steaming rice rests beside her, the grains swollen and fragrant. She mixes in the herbs, saffron, and a drizzle of oil. The guard inhales its aroma as he passes. Even the air tastes warm. He turns into a wider alley where several houses share a communal kitchen area. Here the air is thick with smoke but alive with activity. Large copper pots simmer over low fires. Steam rises in uneven bursts. A young man stirs one pot with a long wooden paddle, leaning back from the heat as though negotiating with it. Another covers a pan with a woven lid to keep flies away. A third splashes water over the stone floor, raising a small cloud of steam that mingles with the cooking smells. A historical fact enters the guard's mind. Because wood and charcoal were expensive, many households shared ovens or fired their pots in communal kitchens like this one. People brought their dough, their stews, their rice, their lentils, each waiting for a place over the fire. It created predictable chaos, but also a strange sense of unity. Hunger, after all, is excellent at creating community. He walks between two steaming pots. One contains a thick lentil stew, golden from turmeric and bubbling at the edges. The other simmers with chickpeas and lamb bones, sending a rich aroma into the air. The cook tending the pots wipes his brow with the edge of his tunic and glances at the guard. "Too hot for midday," he says. "Even the stew is sweating." The guard gives a quiet snort of amusement. Another cook kneads dough on a wooden slab, pressing it with both hands until it softens into a smooth elastic mound. He pinches off small pieces, shapes them into flat rounds, and slaps each onto the hot walls of a clay tandoor oven. Within moments the bread puffs, browns, and gives off that unmistakable smell, the warm, slightly smoky scent that signals fresh bread. A boy waits with a basket to collect the rounds as they are pulled away with a pair of long iron hooks. Bread is life here. Even the poorest homes stretch their budgets to include a few thin rounds each day. The guard continues. A woman stands near a low stone basin washing vegetables, eggplants, onions, squash, rinsing them with water carried in from an alley cistern earlier that morning. The water is warm now, heated by the sun, but it serves its purpose. She slices the vegetables into thick pieces and tosses them into a pot, where they sizzle when they hit the oil. The scent of frying eggplant rises into the air, rich, earthy, unmistakably dense. The guard's stomach acknowledges it with a faint, reluctant twist. He moves past a doorway where someone is mixing yogurt with fresh herbs. Another is pounding garlic and salt together with a stone pestle until they form a smooth paste. The smell of garlic grows stronger, cutting through the thicker scents of oil and smoke. Garlic is the city's quiet guardian, fortifying meals, healing the sick, and perfuming the entire neighborhood, whether people want it or not. From the far side of the alley comes laughter. A group of children sits beneath the shade of a woven awning, peeling boiled eggs and stuffing them with bits of herbs and crushed dates. They argue playfully over who gets the larger portion. One child drops an egg in the dust, picks it up, shakes it vigorously, and declares it clean enough. The others howl with laughter. A woman rushes over, scolding them and snatching the egg away before it reaches a mouth. The guard hides his smile and looks away. He steps into another lane where a butcher works under a hanging cloth awning. The butcher wipes his knife with a cloth and arranges cuts of meat on a stone slab. He works quickly. Meat spoils faster than moods in this heat. A swarm of flies hovers nearby. The butcher waves them away, muttering that the flies have better appetites than customers. The guard knows the truth. Midday is not the hour for buying meat unless one plans to cook immediately. Next to the butcher, a food seller ladles a thick stew into small wooden bowls and sets them along the counter. The steam rising from the stew curls upward in shimmering ribbons. A few labourers gather around, grateful for the shade and the simple filling meal. The guard hears snippets of conversation, complaints about the sun, about aching backs, about a neighbour's loud rooster. In Baghdad, even lunchtime conversation sounds like a negotiation with life. As he moves along the lane, he passes a house where a woman lifts the lid from a pot boiling vigorously. A cloud of steam envelops her face and she steps back with a gasp. The smell of spices, cardamom, bay leaves, cloves, bursts into the air. She coughs and laughs at herself, waving the cloud away as though swatting at a mischievous genie. The guard smirks. Kitchens in Baghdad are as dangerous as they are comforting. A lesser-known detail surfaces in his thoughts. Some families sprinkle the floor around their cooking pots with a thin layer of flour so they can tell whether mice have visited during the night. Powdered footprints betray tiny thieves. It's a simple trick, but in a city where food is precious, simple tricks matter. He returns to the street where the sun has climbed higher still. Heat rolls off the stone walls, fabric awnings ripple gently, casting trembling shadows. The smells of cooking grow heavier, settling like invisible cloth over every doorway. He steps into a small plaza where several vendors sit behind low tables. One sells fresh cheese wrapped in soft cloth squares. Another offers bowls of olives glistening with oil and dusted with crushed herbs. A third sells honeycomb dripping with syrup so thick it stretches like molten gold when scooped. A man fans the cheese with a palm leaf, muttering at the flies. Another vendor sprinkles water onto the ground in front of his stall to settle the dust and cool the air slightly. The droplets hiss as they land on hot stone. The guard pauses near the table where a woman is grilling thin strips of meat over a small charcoal fire. The meat sizzles loudly, releasing a rich aroma of fat and spice. She turns each strip with long wooden tongs. The smoke rises with a distinct smell, sharp, savoury, comforting. Despite the heat, several people wait nearby, drawn by the promise of warm food. He continues walking, allowing the marketplace scents and sounds to swirl around him. People eat in doorways, on steps, beneath awnings, in whatever shade they can find. Bowls clink, bread tears. Laughter rises in soft bursts. Even in heat, even in hardship, the city uses food to steady itself. The guard steps into the shade of a long colonnade where a group of men sits sharing a meal. Flatbread, olives, a pot of spiced broth, a bowl of lentils. One of them waves a piece of bread at the guard in greeting. The guard lifts his hand in return and keeps walking. He's not hungry yet. Hunger in this heat is slow to appear. The sun glints brightly off a copper pot sitting on a windowsill. Someone inside is stirring its contents with a long spoon. Steam trails lazily from it, disappearing into the shimmering air. The guard watches for a moment before moving on. The smells, the heat, the movement, it is all part of the city's rhythm. Midday in Baghdad is thick, fragrant, exhausting and alive. And the guard walks through it, steady as a shadow. The guard leaves the kitchens and midday bustle behind, turning toward a quieter part of the city, if anything in Baghdad can truly be called quiet. This district lies farther from the river, farther from the bazaars, tucked between winding residential lanes and the edges of the administrative quarters. It is a place where people retreat during the hottest hours, but not to sleep. Instead, they gather to solve the city's problems, count its money, track its goods, record its grievances, and whisper its secrets. This is the administrative heart of Baghdad. The guard steps into a broad avenue lined with tall buildings, whose walls cast deep, precious shadows across the street. Here, the heat remains, but its sharpness softens slightly beneath the stone arches and high latticed windows. The air smells different too. Less of kitchens, more of parchment, ink, wax, wool, and dust that has not moved for several hours. He slows his pace. These buildings hold a particular kind of heavy silence, the silence of people speaking carefully, thinking slowly, and writing constantly. Ahead, he reaches the first of many government halls. Its entrance is wide, draped with a thick woolen curtain that keeps the interior dim and cool. He pushes it aside and enters. The hall inside is long and nearly empty, except for a row of low desks running along one wall. Several scribes sit there, each with a reed pen in hand, copying documents, tallying numbers, or recording new petitions. Their movements are small but constant. Scratch, pause, dip, scribble, scratch again. The sound is repetitive but gentle, like a soft rain falling on clay tiles. A historical fact enters the guard's thoughts. Baghdad's bureaucracy was famously complex, with record-keeping systems so thorough that even minor disputes about land, water rights, taxes, merchants' fees were written, sealed, and archived. Entire rooms were filled with nothing but reports on grain distribution or canal maintenance. Paperwork, it seems, was invented long before anyone realized it might one day be a curse. One scribe looks up briefly as the guard passes. His eyes are tired, ringed with shadows, as though he has not left the hall for days. Perhaps he hasn't. Some scribes work through heat and hunger, chasing deadlines that no one outside the building truly understands. The guard steps out into a courtyard behind the hall. Here, clerks and minor officials sit in small clusters beneath a pergola. Scrolls lie open on their laps. Some argue softly over the interpretation of a regulation. Others list inventory items or recite accounts from memory to check for errors. One clerk rubs his temples and mutters, "If one more merchant submits a complaint about canal water, I will throw myself into the canal." Another replies dryly, "That would give the merchant something new to complain about." The group chuckles, their laughter small and weary. Bureaucracy, the guard thinks, always sounds the same. No matter the century. He walks on. The next building he enters is busier. People crowd near a long counter, presenting sealed scrolls, bags of coins, folded letters, and crates of goods requiring inspection. The air is thick with impatience. A tax collector stands behind the counter, his expression carved into stone. Deputies sit on stools beside him, examining documents, checking seals, weighing coins. The tax collector calls out names with a voice so flat and calm it almost sounds like chanting. A merchant steps forward, arguing that the tariff on his goods is too high. The tax collector listens, blinking slowly. "Your goods arrived after sunrise," he says. "Rates change at sunrise." The merchant protests. The tax collector repeats himself word for word, tone unchanged. The guard watches as the merchant's frustration deflates like a torn water skin. Eventually he sighs, hands over the coins, and shuffles away. Heat has a way of killing arguments before they're born. A lesser-known detail flickers through the guard's mind. Some tax officials kept tiny clay bowls filled with cool river water under their desks to dip their fingers into when counting coins. It prevented sweat from sticking to the metal. The guard spots one such bowl beneath a deputy's stool and nods silently. Methods change, but human discomfort stays the same. He exits the hall and follows a narrow passage connecting several administrative offices. The passage smells faintly of beeswax, the scent of sealing tablets used to close official documents. Several sealed scrolls lie in large wicker baskets waiting to be sorted. An overworked clerk sits beside them, wiping sweat from his brow. Through an open window, the guard hears raised voices from an adjoining office. He pauses. Inside, two mid-level administrators argue over the allocation of canal water for irrigation. Their gestures are sharp, their voices tight. One insists the new distribution chart is wrong. The other insists it is mathematically perfect. A third man sits between them with his face buried in his hands. The guard moves on quickly. He knows better than to linger near bureaucratic battles. They have no winners. He enters a side courtyard where a group of accountants sit cross-legged on mats. Wooden tally boards lie before them, pegs arranged in rows. The accountants slide the pegs from side to side, murmuring numbers under their breath. Their faces are calm, eerily calm. Some people find peace in prayer. These men find it in arithmetic. A small bird hops near the tally boards, pecking at a crumb. One accountant looks down at it, pauses, and then shifts a peg thoughtfully. The guard cannot tell whether the peg movement is related to the bird or the calculation. With accountants, both are possible. He continues into another hall. This one holds several low benches arranged in neat rows filled with petitioners waiting to present grievances to a magistrate. Their clothing varies. Wealthy merchants in crisp robes, labourers with dust-covered sleeves, a farmer clutching a broken irrigation tool, a woman holding a folded piece of cloth containing something heavy. The air buzzes softly with murmured complaints. One man fans himself with a woven reed fan and whispers dramatically to the person beside him, "If the magistrate delays us much longer, I'll melt into a puddle." The guard watches him dab his forehead with a cloth and wonders whether he already has. Finally, he reaches the magistrate's chamber. Inside, the magistrate sits behind a large wooden desk carved with geometric patterns. Two assistants flank him, one holding a stack of scrolls, the other a slate tablet for recording decisions. Petitioners step forward one at a time. Each plea, each argument, each accusation is stated calmly. The magistrate listens, expression unreadable, asks a question, asks another, gives an answer, and signals for the next petitioner. The chamber runs like a well-oiled loom. Historical debate rises in the guard's mind. Were magistrates in Baghdad given broad autonomy, or were their decisions tightly controlled by higher officials? Scholars disagree. Some claim magistrates wielded great authority. Others insist they were merely the lowest rung of a long chain. The guard suspects the truth is both, and neither. He leaves the magistrate's chamber and steps back onto the street. The sun has begun its slow descent, but the heat remains thick and heavy. Shadows stretch a little longer now, like tired animals seeking comfort. The guard walks along the side of a tall building where the stone radiates warmth like a low fire. He passes a papermaker's workshop where beaten pulp dries on screens, giving off a faint sour smell. Workers hang sheets from wooden racks, each page thin, perfect, nearly translucent. Paper is precious. Knowledge may shape the city, but paper carries it. A final stop remains, the record hall. Inside, shelves reach from floor to ceiling, filled with scrolls wrapped in cloth and sealed. The air is dry and still. A few clerks move between the shelves with slow steps, retrieving records requested earlier. One clerk drags a small ladder behind him, its legs scraping softly. Another reads aloud the faded writing on a scroll to verify its contents. The guard stands at the entrance for a moment. This room is the memory of the city. Its taxes, its disputes, its births, its deaths, its grain counts, its trade agreements. The records may not survive forever, but for now they hold the fragile thread of order. He turns and walks out, back into the glowing courtyard. Administration may not be beautiful, he thinks, but without it Baghdad would collapse within a week. Papers and pens keep the city standing almost as much as bricks and mortar. He steps into the lengthening afternoon light. The bureaucratic heart of Baghdad beats steadily behind him, and the city continues its endless, complicated rhythm. The guard leaves the administrative quarter behind just as the sun begins to tilt westward, casting long, soft shadows between the buildings. The air is still hot, oppressively so, but the sharpness of midday has eased. People begin to emerge again, like cautious creatures testing the world after a storm. Afternoon in Baghdad has a different rhythm. Things slow, gentler currents rise, and the city briefly pretends it can rest. He walks toward the western district where merchants, artisans, travellers, and ordinary families slowly reclaim the streets. The heat nudges them into motion, slow, deliberate steps, careful breaths. It is not yet comfortable outside, but neither is it unbearable. This is the hour when the city breathes out. The guard passes a group of women gathered beside a shaded wall, fanning themselves with woven palm leaves. They share news in soft voices. Whose relative arrived from Basra, which child has fallen ill, which neighbour purchased a new carpet dyed with indigo. Their words drift lazily in the warm air. From behind them, a door opens and releases a burst of cooler indoor air scented faintly with limes. Someone has crushed the fruit into water for the afternoon heat. Farther along, the guard steps into a market lane that was nearly deserted at noon but is now stirring with slow revival. Shopkeepers lift the heavy cloth shades from their doorways. Some sweep the dust away in long, steady arcs. Others sprinkle water on the stones outside their shops, creating small wet patches that shimmer as they cool. Steam rises from a few, but not as quickly as before. The first voices of bargaining begin to sound, soft at first, like the market is clearing its throat. Near a spice stall, a merchant arranges small clay bowls filled with turmeric, cumin, coriander, dried mint, and saffron. The colours glow in the afternoon light, deep golds, reds, browns, and greens that shimmer in the shifting shadows. The guard catches a faint scent of toasted sesame drifting from the bowls. The merchant notices him and nods. "Still hot," he says. "Even the spices are sweating." The guard suppresses a smile. Everything in Baghdad, it seems, has an opinion about the weather. He moves on, passing a cloth vendor gently shaking dust from rolls of dyed cotton and linen. The fabrics ripple in the faint breeze like soft waves, indigo, rose, ochre, and pale green. He brushes a length of fabric with the back of his hand and feels the familiar warmth. Cloth in this city never feels cool. It holds the sun the way a jar holds water. A potter sits beneath a striped awning nearby, shaping clay with wet hands. The wheel spins slowly, steady as a heartbeat. Clay squelches between his fingers. A bowl takes form, smooth and symmetrical. The potter hums quietly, tapping his foot to keep rhythm with the wheel. Clay dust clings to his clothes, forming a pale crust over his sleeves. When he wipes his brow with the back of his wrist, he leaves a streak of wet grey across his skin. The guard nods to him. The potter nods back, his hands never stopping. A historical fact returns to the guard. Baghdad's artisans were known for their variety. Potters, weavers, metalworkers, leather tanners, glassmakers, each with their own quarter, their own techniques, their own guilds. Travellers often wrote that you could walk the length of the city and never hear silence, not because of shouting or chaos, but because of the constant music of work. He walks past a group of metalworkers sitting in a shaded forge. Their tools lie idle at this hour. No one wants to shape red-hot metal in the lingering heat. Instead, they polish finished pieces. Brass lamps, silver-inlaid bowls, delicate copper trays etched with swirling lines. A young apprentice dips a cloth in oil and rubs a lamp until its surface glows like captured sunlight. He holds it up proudly. An older artisan grunts approval without looking up. A lesser-known detail surfaces in the guard's thoughts. Apprentices in Baghdad often slept inside their workshops, curled between crates of tools and piles of raw materials. The smell of oil, metal, clay or wool became part of their skin, a lifetime scent. He steps into a broader street where larger shops stand behind wooden lattices and carved stone facades. Here, a bookseller is reopening his stall, arranging scrolls in neat rows. Nearby, a jeweler adjusts tiny bells on a silver anklet, testing their soft chiming. A herbalist grinds dried flowers with a mortar and pestle, releasing a fresh wave of scent: lavender, rose, and a hint of lemon. The guard pauses near the herbalist's stall. The smell is pleasant, almost cool compared to the rest of the city. The herbalist looks at him with raised eyebrows. "Heat headache?" he asks. The guard shakes his head, but the herbalist still reaches for a small clay vial. "Mint oil," he says, tapping it. "Rub on the temples, or breathe deeply. Works better than complaining about the sun." The guard gives a slight nod of thanks, though he does not take the vial. He continues walking until the street opens into a small plaza where several men sit under the shade of a large fig tree. Its leaves cast a dappled pattern on the ground, and the air beneath it is slightly cooler, tinged with the sweet smell of ripe fruit. One man is reciting a poem in a slow, measured voice. Another keeps rhythm by tapping his fingers against a ceramic cup. The poem drifts up like incense, soft, thoughtful, and half lost in the afternoon heat. Children run through the plaza, their feet slapping against sun-warmed stone. They chase each other in wide circles, laughing, shouting, falling, rising again. One girl carries a reed toy shaped like a bird. She holds it to the wind and spins, letting it flutter on its small pivot. The guard watches her and remembers the reed cutters by the river earlier. Everything in this city, from toys to roofs to baskets, begins as a reed. The guard turns down a narrower alley where the buildings press closer together. Here, people sit in doorways to catch whatever breeze slips between the walls. A man leans back on a stool, sipping cool water poured from the tall clay jug. The jug sweats lightly in the shade, water slowly evaporating through its porous walls, cooling the contents inside. The guard watches a droplet slide down its surface before continuing on. Another man lounges on a mat, mending a sandal with a curved needle. He squints as he works, muttering to himself about broken straps and careless walking. At his feet lie 3 more sandals, awaiting repair. The guard steps around him carefully. Ahead, a small workshop door stands open, releasing the smell of warm beeswax. A candlemaker arranges thick candles on a wooden rack to cool. Their surfaces glisten faintly in the fading light. The guard steps closer and smells the honeyed sweetness of beeswax mixed with smoke. A single candle burns on the workshop table, its flame steady in the still air. Its small glow seems defiant against the fading glare outside. A historical debate resurfaces in the guard's mind. Was Baghdad at its peak the largest city in the world? Some accounts say yes, its population unmatched. Others argue that numbers were inflated, that only certain districts were truly dense. But looking around him now at the movement, the voices, the crafts, the food, the sweat, he believes the city feels large enough to swallow the world. He continues walking. The afternoon deepens, the shadows lengthen, the heat softens but does not release its grip. The city shifts from survival to renewal. People prepare for evening, for cooler air, for the return of energy. A boy runs past the guard carrying a tray of steaming bowls, the scent of lentils trailing behind him. A woman sweeps dust from her doorstep, raising more dust as she works. A man leans out of an upper window, shaking out a rug that releases a cascade of beige powder onto the alley below. Someone curses from beneath. The window shuts quickly. The guard steps into a final lane where the city quiets again. The sound becomes a gentle hum, distant voices, soft clinking from nearby workshops, the faint whisper of wind between stone. Baghdad, even tired from the heat, never stops living. It simply changes rhythm. The guard feels the shift and keeps walking, steady and familiar, as the afternoon slowly melts toward evening. The guard moves deeper into the city as the afternoon thins into early evening, and Baghdad begins its slow, graceful transformation. The light softens. The heat loosens its grip. Shadows stretch long and gentle across the stones. The city exhales, finally, truly exhales, for the first time since dawn. This is the hour that belongs to workers returning from long shifts, to merchants closing their stalls, to children who suddenly have too much energy again, and to performers who step out of obscurity like moths testing the air. He passes beneath an archway that opens onto a wide street leading toward the entertainment quarter, though calling it that gives an impression of order it doesn't deserve. In reality, it is a winding web of tea houses, storytellers' corners, musicians' alcoves, and improvised stages that appear wherever someone has enough charisma to gather a crowd. The first sign he's entering the district is the sound, a lute being tuned, strings tightening with soft creaks, a drum tapped twice to check the tension, a flute releasing a single long note that drifts like smoke across the alley. Then the smell, charcoal glowing in small clay braziers, burning slow, the sweetness of date syrup warming in metal pots, and faint hints of rosewater carried by women who prepare trays of tea. The guard's shoulders relax almost unconsciously. After hours in the sun, after the weight of administration and heat and duty, this district feels like stepping into a pool of warm, living sound. The first performer he sees is a storyteller standing on a low stone step. His robe is loose and faded, but he wears it with pride. A small crowd is gathering around him, children in the front leaning forward eagerly, adults behind them, arms crossed, pretending not to care too much. The storyteller raises one hand, eyes half closed, and delivers the opening line of a tale in a voice so smooth it seems polished by years of use. The guard doesn't stop to listen, but the cadence follows him for several steps, like a soft rope pulling the air together. Historical fact crosses his thoughts. Baghdad's storytellers, Hakawatis, were as important to the city's spirit as scholars were to its mind. Their stories preserved histories, legends, scandals, jokes, and warnings. In a city with so much knowledge, it was the storytellers who made knowledge breathe. He turns a corner and hears the bright chiming of small metal bells. A musician sits on a woven mat, his ankle wrapped with a thin chain of bells that ring gently as he taps his foot. He plays a short-necked lute, fingers gliding smoothly along the strings. The melody is simple, repetitive, hypnotic. A small crowd sits around him, some drinking tea, others just letting the music settle into their bones. Farther along, two men prepare for a shadow play behind a cloth screen stretched across a wooden frame. Oil lamps flicker behind the screen, throwing silhouettes of camels, monsters, kings, and heroes. Children gather before the screen with wide, shining eyes. A boy taps his friend excitedly. The guard hears him whisper, "I know this one. The lion is actually a prince." The guard smiles slightly. In Baghdad, plots are rarely secrets. He continues, ahead a tea house fills the street with warmth. Its doorway is covered by a thick curtain, but the interior glows with a golden lamplight. Men sit on long benches, sipping small glasses of steaming tea. The scent of cardamom spills into the street. A server moves quickly among the tables, balancing a tray full of cups. Another man heats a copper kettle over hot coals, its spout whistling soft puffs of steam. A pot of water simmers on a nearby brazier, releasing the clean, slightly earthy smell of boiling river water. Many claim that tea tastes better closer to the river. Whether true or not, people here swear by it. The guard passes a group of older men sitting on stools outside the tea house. They play a board game, pieces clicking sharply on wood. One man leans forward and mutters, "If you move there, I'll know you've grown foolish." His opponent replies, "If I move there, it means I've grown wiser than you." Their argument spirals gently, soft as the evening breeze. A lesser-known detail flickers in the guard's mind. In some parts of the city, tea houses doubled as informal news centres. Travellers would stand and recite what they had seen beyond the walls: distant wars, new trade routes, strange customs. People listened, sceptical but fascinated. News travelled by cups of tea as swiftly as by letters. He walks on. In a wider courtyard, a performer stands with a tall staff. A ring of spectators surrounds him. He balances the staff on his forehead, then on his chin, then on one finger. The crowd claps softly so as not to break the concentration. The performer bows theatrically, pretending to faint from exhaustion, prompting laughter from those watching. The guard pauses at the edge and watches for a moment. Even he cannot hide a faint smirk. Evening deepens. The light turns thick and amber, clinging to the tops of buildings. Lamps begin to glow one by one, little suns captured in glass. The city becomes warmer in colour even as the temperature cools. The guard steps toward a quieter corner of the district, where the performers thin out but music still floats through the air. A man sits alone beneath a window, playing a flute with slow, contemplative breaths. The tune rises and falls gently like ripples on the river. The guard stops, listening. Music at this hour feels like a bridge between the heat of the day and the softness of the coming night. He continues walking, following the sounds of laughter, low conversations, the clink of glass, the soft hum of humanity shaking off the day's weight. He turns onto a street where lanterns hang from ropes stretched between buildings. Their light flickers on the faces of passers-by, tired, smiling, thoughtful, alive. A woman carrying a tray of sweets walks by, offering small honey-soaked pastries. Their scent, fried dough, sesame, sugar, fills the air like a brief sweet promise. The guard stops near a group of young men listening to a poet recite verses. The poet's voice is steady, warm, rhythmic. His words float in the air like incense smoke. One listener leans back, eyes closed, letting the poem paint shapes inside his mind. Travellers often wrote that Baghdad could feel like a festival every evening, whether or not an official celebration was happening. People worked hard, sweated hard, and lived hard, but they also believed deeply in gathering, storytelling, music, and sharing the sweetness of their day. The guard steps away, walking toward the quieter path that leads out of the entertainment quarter. The sounds soften behind him. The laughter becomes a murmur. The music becomes a distant thread. The lamps dim to a warm, scattered constellation. Evening has fully arrived, and Baghdad feels gentler now, like a city stretching after a long day, settling into its own slow heartbeat. The guard walks on, ready for what the night will bring. The guard leaves the lively hum of the entertainment district behind and steps into streets that are beginning to cool at last. Evening in Baghdad is not a single moment. It is a slow unfolding. The city releases its tension like a tired body easing into a soft cushion. Shadows deepen. Lamps flicker to life. The smell of the day fades, replaced by the scents of night. Warm bread pulled from late ovens, perfumed oils dabbed behind ears, and the faint sweetness of jasmine drifting from rooftop gardens. This is the hour when families climb to their roofs to escape the heat trapped inside their homes. The guard approaches a narrow stairway built into the outer wall of a multi-story dwelling. Curious voices drift down, children asking questions, parents answering in tired tones, someone laughing at a joke too soft to decipher. He passes beneath the stairway and into a broad lane lined with doorways left open to catch the evening breeze. Inside the homes, he glimpses of light. The soft glow of clay lamps, long shadows stretching across woven mats, the familiar clutter of daily life. Sandals neatly arranged near walls, wooden bowls drying on shelves, and copper jugs reflecting lamplight in warm, rounded gleams. He steps closer to one open doorway where the family has gathered for their evening meal. They sit on low cushions around a simple cloth laid across the floor. Flatbread, bowls of lentils, onions sliced thin, pickled lemons, and a dish of stewed eggplant. Nothing extravagant, but comforting and warm. A woman breaks a piece of bread and hands it to her youngest child, who accepts it sleepily. The guard moves on, giving them privacy. Evening meals in Baghdad were often modest. Historical fact he remembers hearing once. The largest meal of the day came earlier, but the evening spread was slow, peaceful, meant to be savoured in the moment when the world cooled. He turns toward a quieter structure, a small neighbourhood mosque. The last light of day glows on its simple facade. A few men sit outside, speaking in low tones, their sandals arranged neatly near the entrance. One elder leans against the wall, sipping cool water from a clay cup. The cup sweats gently in his hand. A soft breeze rises, carrying with it the mixed scents of night. Smoke from lit lamps, herbs crushed beneath someone's heel, and, strangely, freshly washed wool. The guard recognizes that scent. Someone nearby has scrubbed blankets in evening water and hung them over a wall to dry. The damp fibers release a grassy, earthy aroma as they breathe in the cooling air. He steps into a narrower alley where the walls rise high on either side. The air is cooler here, flowing like water through the shaded passage. Wooden lattice windows glow from within. A cat watches him from a windowsill, blinking slowly, its tail twitching in the dimming light. Cats rule these alleys. They move silently, sleep endlessly, and appear in doorways as though materializing from shadows. The guard continues until he reaches a communal courtyard where neighbors gather for the evening lull. Here, women sit in a circle weaving baskets made of reeds, thin, flexible strips that creak softly as they bend. Their movements are methodical, fingers tracing patterns instinctively. A woven basket forms the same way a day does, slowly, steadily, without hurry. A lesser-known detail flickers into the guard's memory. In some neighborhoods, reeds cut near the Tigris were soaked in water overnight to make them easier to weave in the cool hours of evening. He glances at a bucket beside one woman. The reeds inside glisten faintly. It is true, then. To one side, a group of older men share a game played with pebbles and etched lines drawn into the dirt. They argue softly about the rules, though each insists he remembers perfectly from his grandfather's time. The guard suspects they modify the rules daily just to keep the game interesting. He walks past a cluster of children gathered around an older girl who tells them a story, her hands drawing shapes in the air. The children lean closer, their faces glowing in lamplight. One child bumps another, and the second hushes him dramatically. Stories, whether told in grand squares or simple courtyards, carry the same enchantment. The guard moves toward the far end of the courtyard, where a man lights a clay lamp. The flame jumps to life with a soft crackle, illuminating the man's face in warm gold. Lamps like this appear by the hundreds every evening, turning the city into a constellation of tiny stars anchored to earth. A historical debate flickers into the guard's awareness. Some later scholars argue that Baghdad's night lighting made it one of the few cities in the world where people could safely walk after dark. Others claim this was exaggerated romanticism. Looking around now, the guard sees truth in between. The lamps are small, yes. Fragile, yes. Yet collectively they give the night a body, a shape, a warmth. Not daylight, but its quiet cousin. He follows another lane and finds a rooftop stair. Several families have climbed up already. Gentle laughter drifts downward. He ascends the steps, emerging onto the flat roof. The air up here feels different, cleaner, quieter, cooler. A soft wind brushes across the rooftops like a hand smoothing rumpled fabric. Families sit on woven mats. Children chase each other between low parapet walls. Women braid one another's hair. Men sip tea, leaning back against rolled blankets. A baby sleeps in a cradle made from palm fiber, rocked lightly by a mother's foot. Above them, the sky turns violet, then indigo, then deeper still. Stars appear one by one. The Tigris below glimmers faintly in the distance, as though catching and releasing the sky's reflection. The guard stands at the roof's edge, looking out across the wide expanse of Baghdad. From here, the city feels endless. Layers of rooftops, alleys, domes, towers, lamps, and lives. The smell of jasmine drifts from a nearby roof garden. A pot of water cools by evaporation, beads forming on its clay surface. Someone burns a stick of incense. A soft bell rings somewhere, perhaps a distant shop closing for the night. Everything slows and everything softens. Baghdad, for a brief and gentle moment, becomes quiet. The guard takes a deep breath, feeling the day beginning to release him. Night is coming, and the city is ready. The guard descends from the rooftop as night settles fully over Baghdad. The air is cooled enough that breathing no longer feels like swallowing fire. The stones beneath his feet, still warm from the day, now radiate a gentle heat that soothes rather than scorches. Lamps glow along the streets, hundreds of them, casting soft, wavering halos on walls and doorways. Their flames bend and tremble as the night breeze stirs, each light flickering like a thought-fighting sleep. Night transforms the city, not into something quiet. Baghdad is never truly quiet, but into something slower, softer, more deliberate. The guard steps into a lane where craftsmen have begun their nighttime work. Some trades favour darkness. Metalworkers etching fine designs by lamplight. Woodcarvers shaping intricate patterns in silence. And scribes copying texts in the hours when the world stops demanding their attention. He pauses at a doorway where a jeweler sits cross-legged beneath a hanging lantern. The jeweler holds a thin silver wire in one hand and a delicate tool in the other. He bends the wire into a shape, a loop, then a swirl, then a tiny clasp. His hands move steadily, precisely, shadows of his fingers dancing on the wall beside him. He dips a brush into a small pot and applies a thin line of resin to secure the clasp. Nearby, tiny bells lie scattered across a cloth like droplets of metal dew. The guard moves on. The smell of night-blooming jasmine intensifies as he enters a garden alley lined with small courtyards. Some doors are open, letting the fragrance drift into the homes. A woman sweeps purple petals from her threshold, muttering softly about wind and messy flowers. Behind her, a man adjusts a clay lamp whose flame keeps sputtering in the breeze. The two exchange tired smiles. Night, even with all its beauty, is still a time of chores. The guard passes by a millstone that stands still now, its grinding done for the day. Nearby, pigeons coo from their rooftop cages, soft, rhythmical sounds that blend with the hum of the city. Cats prowl along the walls, silent and focused, their eyes glowing faintly in lamplight. He enters a narrow passage that leads toward the inner neighborhoods. Here, night feels intimate. People speak in hushed voices. Lamps burn low. Someone strums a simple tune on a lute. A woman hums a lullaby from a window, her voice drifting like silk through the warm air. A child responds with a sleepy murmur. The guard turns a corner and finds himself near a small pool fed by a trickling channel from the river. Water gathers here in a smooth, dark surface that reflects the lamps above like a broken constellation. A group of men sits beside the pool, washing dust from their hands and feet. Their voices are low, their movements slow. One pours water over another's hands. Another pats his face with a wet cloth, sighing with relief. Historical fact crosses the guard's mind. Many homes kept small basins of water near entrances so residents could cool themselves before sleep. Water was not abundant, but people used it carefully, reverently, just enough to bring comfort, not waste. He moves on. Toward the city's western edge, he approaches a district known for its night markets. These are not the daytime bazaars. No loud bargaining, no frantic movement. Instead, people sell a handful of goods under low lamplight. Baked sweets, fresh bread for the next morning, perfumed oils, herbal remedies, small clay lamps, combs and trinkets. Buyers walk slowly, choosing items with the patience of people no longer in a hurry. A seller offers the guard a small cup of sweetened date drink. He declines, but the vendor insists with a grin. The guard accepts and drinks. The liquid is cool, thick, and comforting. The vendor nods proudly. "Helps the night settle into your bones," he says. The guard hands back the cup with a nod of thanks. He continues down the lane where a perfumer stands behind a wooden counter holding small jars. He opens one, releasing a warm amber scent. Another holds rose oil. A third, musk. The guard catches each scent briefly as he walks, each one rich and thick, carrying its own story. Next to the perfumer, an old man sells simple remedies. Fennel for stomach pains, mint for fatigue, willow bark for fevers. A woman buys a packet of herbs, listening carefully as the old man instructs her on how to steep them. The guard listens too, though he keeps walking. The night grows deeper, quieter. He reaches a long pathway leading toward the river. The moon hangs low and wide above the Tigris, casting a pale ribbon of light across the water. The river moves more quickly now than it did in the day, carrying cool air through the city. Lamps flicker along the water's edge. Boats rock gently, their ropes creaking in soft, sleepy rhythms. Reed cutters, finished with their work hours ago, now sit on the bank sharing a small fire. One plucks a reed flute with idle hands. Another roasts a few nuts in a clay bowl. They speak little. Night is their time to rest. The guard walks closer to the river. The coolness surprises him every time, like stepping into a memory of spring. The wind carries the scent of wet reeds, river mud, and a hint of distant smoke from a lamp or cooking fire. He closes his eyes briefly, letting the breeze wash the heat from his eyelashes. He heads toward a small bridge spanning one of the irrigation canals. Water whispers beneath it. The canal, dark and narrow, reflects only fragments of moonlight. A man stands at the bridge rail, tossing crumbs to drifting fish. "For good luck," he murmurs, "and because they look hungry." The guard says nothing, but pauses for a heartbeat before moving on. He enters another street where tall homes cast heavy shadows. Lamps glow behind latticed windows, turning the patterns into living silhouettes. Here, the city feels more secretive. The guard hears whispers through a half-open door. Someone reading aloud, someone praying, someone laughing softly. He moves steadily forward. Eventually he reaches a small square dominated by a large sycamore tree. Its branches sway in the night breeze, leaves rustling like pages turned by invisible hands. Beneath it, a man sits alone with a clay lamp beside him and a parchment spread across his knees. He writes slowly, dipping his pen into a pot of ink. His lips move silently as he shapes the words. The guard lingers in the shadows, watching. Writing at night is both a luxury and a necessity in this city, when thoughts are clearer and the heat cannot burn them away. Some scholars will later argue whether Baghdad's vibrancy came from its wealth, its knowledge, its position along trade routes, or its political power. Others insist it came from its spirit, its constant drive to live, learn, debate, and create, even after the sun had exhausted the world. The guard does not know which theory is correct, but he knows this. The city is alive. He continues on until the sycamore tree fades behind him, and the narrow lane opens into a small courtyard littered with sleeping mats. A few men lie already asleep, rising and falling gently with each breath. A dog curls beside one, its tail wrapped around its nose. A lamp burns low in a nearby doorway, its flame almost gone. The guard stands in the center of the courtyard, feeling the night settle fully. The heat of day has finally loosened. The sounds have softened to murmurs. The lamps glow faintly. The air carries nothing but calm. Baghdad sleeps lightly, never fully, always ready to rise again. But in this moment, the city rests, and the guard, after a long day walking its heart, allows himself to rest too. Night settles over Baghdad like a deep, warm blanket, softening every edge the day had sharpened. The lamps burn lower now, their flames shrinking into calm amber points that sway gently whenever a breeze drifts through the alleys. The Tigris moves slowly beneath the moon, its surface smooth and dark, reflecting slivers of silver light that seem to float rather than flow. Rooftops grow quiet, courtyards fall still, doorways close not abruptly but with the soft finality of a sigh. Somewhere, a last piece of bread is broken, a final cup of water is poured, someone murmurs a prayer, someone else hums a tune they will forget by morning. The city loosens breath by breath, like a tired traveller lowering themselves onto a cool stone floor after a long journey. Above it all, the night air spreads with deliberate gentleness. It slips through the narrowest alleys, gathers in shaded corners, brushes across woven mats left out to cool. It settles on clay jars, on folded blankets, on rooftops scattered with sleeping shapes. It carries the faintest smells, dried mint, river reeds, warm dust, jasmine just beginning to open. These scents drift slowly, merging into a quiet tapestry of comfort. The city's heartbeat fades to a slow rhythm. Footsteps disappear. Voices fade. The world narrows to small, peaceful sounds, the creak of a wooden beam adjusting to cooler air, the distant ripple of water against stone, the soft scratch of a pen somewhere in the dark, finishing one last line before sleep. And in this stillness, Baghdad becomes something gentle, no longer blazing with heat or humming with noise, but resting, floating, dreaming. A city wrapped in silence, holding its stories lightly, letting the night cradle it toward dawn.